Hey guys, tonight we're not sailing with pirates. No creaking ships, no rum-soaked chaos, no suspicious parrots staring at you like they know your browser history. Instead, we're stepping into a world far less glamorous, far less dramatic, and somehow even more dangerous. The daily life and daily heartbreak of the medieval peasant. A world with no treasure maps, no spectacular sword fights, and not a single eyeliner-wearing swashbuckler in sight. Just mud, smoke, hard labor, and emotions so raw and heavy they make even modern romance drama look like a cheerful children's cartoon. But before we wander into the pastures, hearth fires, and heartbreak of the people who actually kept medieval Europe functioning, go ahead and like the video and subscribe, but only if this kind of soft, weird, mildly emotional bedtime history actually helps you drift off. If not, that's okay. Even medieval peasants didn't agree on everything, especially not the ones arguing over who stole whose turnip. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is right now. It's always 2 a.m. somewhere. And if you're here, you're probably trying to fall asleep to the comforting realization that at least you don't have to survive a winter with no heating, no medicine, and no mattress thicker than a pancake. Now dim those lights, turn on a fan for that soft white noise breeze. Get comfortable. Maybe tuck your feet under a blanket, not because of rats this time, but because a medieval house spirit might decide your toes are a snack offering. Unlikely. But folklore can get weird. Let's pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered what love actually looked like before dating apps, glowing sunsets, and heart-shaped emoji? Before chocolate, candlelit dinners, and long walks on beaches that nobody had time to visit? What did affection mean in a world where every day was work, and every relationship, romantic or otherwise, was tied to survival? What did it feel like to fall in love in a place where you could be married off before your voice even finished changing? Where marriage wasn't about finding your soulmate, but finding someone who can help keep the roof from collapsing and the sheep from wandering into the river. What did it look like to lose someone when medicine barely worked, when winters took more lives than wars, and when grief had to be carried while still plowing fields at sunrise? What was love when the world was cold, smoky, muddy, hungry, and relentlessly practical? And somehow, against all odds, still full of tenderness, jokes, whispered promises, lullabies, and warm hands held in the dark. Tonight, we are going to drift into that world. Not to glamorize it, not to judge it, but to feel it gently, like candlelight flickering across rough timber beams, like the soft creaking of a thatched roof in winter wind, like the quiet heartbeat of a family trying to survive one more day. So take a slow breath in, let the noise of your world fade, and imagine a village where life was harsh, love was complicated, and every moment, good or bad, carried the weight of survival. Settle in, close your eyes if you haven't already, and let the story begin. Chapter 1. The child born into bargain. And now, as your breath settles and the noise of the present flickers into something soft and far away, let's drift into a world where life began not with celebration, but with negotiation. Picture this: a dimly lit, smoky corner of a medieval wattle and daub cottage. A home stitched together from mud, sticks, and stubborn hope. The kind of place where the ceiling leaks when it rains, the floor groans like an old man, and the air is always thick with the scent of burning peat and yesterday's stew. The light comes from a single tallow candle, its flame trembling like it isn't entirely convinced it should be alive. Shadows stretch across the cramped room, bending around the rough timber beams and gathering in the corners like shy spectators. And at the center of this tiny universe, a newborn child, swaddled in coarse linen, the kind that scratches even the softest skin. Not luxurious cloth, not the delicate wrappings of royalty or nobles, just rough, practical fabric, woven by hands that have known more labor than rest. The baby's breath comes in tiny, uncertain whispers. Every exhale is a fragile promise, every inhale a small victory. Because in this world, survival is not assumed, it is bargained for. Around the child, life continues in the quiet chaos of the medieval poor. A mother, pale with exhaustion, rests against the wall, her hair damp with sweat, her eyes heavy but watchful. She has brought life into a world that rarely thanked her for it, a world where childbirth was not a miracle but a gamble. A midwife moves through the shadows, her hands still smelling faintly of herbs and iron. She murmurs prayers under her breath, half to the saints, half to the child, as if both need convincing to stay. Smoke lingers in the air, weaving itself into every object, seeping into blankets, lungs, and memories. It drifts lazily toward the thatched roof, looking for an escape it rarely finds. This is not the soft, pastel-painted version of medieval birth. This is the truth, raw, smoky, dim, and full of quiet desperation. Because this child, this tiny wriggling bundle of linen and hope, is more than a baby. It is a bargaining chip, a future worker, a future helper, a future dowry, a future tie between families trying to survive another winter. In a world where coin was scarce and hunger was abundant, children were threads woven into the fragile tapestry of survival. A daughter might someday marry into a family with warm livestock. A son might someday bring strength to the plow. A child might someday be the reason a family endured. The mother knows this. The father somewhere outside, splitting wood or praying the roof holds, knows this too. Everyone understands it, even if no one says it aloud. But for now, in this single, smoky room, the child is simply a heartbeat wrapped in linen. The candle flickers again, casting a soft glow on the tiny face. No, one knows what kind of life waits beyond that glow. Hardship, certainly. Loss, almost inevitably. But also laughter, and stories by the hearth, and the small joys that make surviving worthwhile. A slow wind pushes against the cottage walls. The daub cracks faintly, but the structure holds, just like the family inside it always has. And you, as you sit in this quiet, fire-stained corner of the past, can feel the weight of a world where life was never guaranteed, only fought for. Tonight, this child begins that fight, wrapped in coarse cloth, surrounded by smoke, welcomed by a world that asks much and gives little. A tiny soul born into a bargain, a promise whispered into the medieval dark. Chapter 2, The Determined Dance of Dirt and Diligence. Hey guys, welcome back to this cozy nook of whimsical history, where cobwebs become companions, and medieval dilemmas are just as relatable as your last attempt at a diet. Remember, salad doesn't replace pizza. Tonight, we're stoking the flames of intrigue literally as we discuss the rhythm of survival for our peasant pal, Olaf, who's all too familiar with the delicate balance of love, laughter, cabbage, and scraping by in the harshest of winters. Now, before you find yourself as snug as a cat in a sunbeam, could you do us a solid? If you're enjoying this hearty serving of historical absurdity, like finding an extra slice of cake hidden in the fridge, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below, but only if you're absolutely tickled. We wouldn't want to burden you with any extra social obligations. After all, who has time for guilt when you're bustling through medieval life? Alright, settle in, dim those lights, perhaps turn on a fan to invoke an air of authenticity. Just imagine it's your own personal wind tunnel. Let's take a moment to ponder. Have you ever felt like survival is just a series of small wins, kind of like that fleeting joy when you find matching socks? Or what about when you're trying to cultivate your inner gardener but end up nurturing a one-wilted leaf plant that looks more hopeful than alive? That's our buddy Olaf's daily grind right there. Congratulations. You've just woken up in 1200s England, the high Middle Ages, the dawn of a day that could only be described as damp and dreary, where every peasant's body is a symphony of aches from working the land more than a farmer works a hamster wheel. Imagine the warmth of the hearth, if only slightly more than a gentle caress, while your feet become best friends with the cold, hard dirt. Let's take a closer look at how Olaf is about to embrace yet another frigid day of endless toil. You shuffle out of the low-ceilinged hut, the smell of earth and lingering smoke curling round you like a gloomy hug. The sun peeks through clouds with the same enthusiasm as a toddler forced to get out of bed for school. In the world of medieval agriculture, every day is like a scratch record, consistently dull yet utterly necessary. Before his first sip of breakfast, the exquisite magic of warm, thin gruel, our dear Olaf begins with what we might call a medieval pep talk, while wiping his calloused hands on his threadbare tunic. He knows today is a battle against the harsh elements and the existential questions of life. First up, the fire. You open the creaky wooden door, navigating your way through a house that feels more like a moldy shoebox than cozy quarters. Can you hear the fire crackling as it fights valiantly against the chill that ebbs through the ancient straw thatch? It's a competition as fierce as a hot dog eating contest. Only no one is winning here. With a sigh worthy of an unsung opera hero, Olaf shovels sparse tinder into the hearth, pondering aloud, is this worth it, or do I just keep throwing kindling until something magical happens? This isn't exactly a tale you'll read in any self-help book, but then again, Olaf enjoys a good existential crisis while tending to flames. Balancing survival and sanity has quite the fine margin when you're on the edge of frostbitten fingers. In the flickering light, you spot Olaf's humble assortment of farming tools, all worn down more than they should be. It's like the tools signed a contract to collectively rust away, as if raindrops had filmed a horror movie called The Slow Decay of Hope. He eyes his only seed packets, old and fragile, like a gambler assessing his dwindling chips. Here we go again, he mumbles, clutching a few thin, pale seeds, which would, if the fates allow it, someday grow into something substantial. Let's talk about planting. Olaf squats down, his knees creaking like ancient doors, and places the seeds into the resilient soil so stubborn it could give the most determined mule a run for its money. Each seed feels like a quiet hope against the backdrop of constant uncertainty. Have you ever planted a tomato in the backyard only for it to turn to a sad lump of brown mush? Welcome to Olaf's life, but with a sprinkle of frost and a pinch of plague. Just for fun. Every shove of dirt reminds him that survival isn't a victory parade. It's an exercise in endurance. In his world, success means chasing after cabbages and carrots and hoping weather conditions play along. It's like rolling the dice, but with more mud and fewer flashy winds. And let's be real, how many times can one man endure the phrase, a mild winter? As Olaf plants the seeds, he can't help but think back to the previous winter, a tale of bitter cold and one too many cabbage dishes that would rival your high school cafeteria. It was like waiting for an Amazon package that never shows up. It's delivered just enough to keep you guessing, but not enough to bring warmth into your life. If only, he sighs, the cabbages could grow as fast as my regrets. Finally, with grit in his hand and a hopeful heart, he brushes the dirt off his palms, standing tall amidst the slapdash patch he calls his farm. It's not glamorous, but it's a reminder that every seed planted is like a silent dream whispered into existence, perhaps a bit dirtier than one's modern Pinterest ambitions, but dreams nonetheless. As you tuck into your blankets tonight, remember Olaf, and let his story be a cozy blanket of absurdity and humor, reminding us that whether you're a medieval peasant or a modern-day procrastinator, all we really need is resilience and maybe a little peek into next month's grocery list. And thus, we close this chapter of Dirt and Destiny. Reflect on our friend Olaf, the man who dances with cabbages and nourishes dreams in the most unlikely of patches. Rest easy, dear listener, and know that as you drift into slumber, the seeds of your own aspirations are quietly blossoming, just waiting for the sun to come. Chapter 3, Bargaining Brews and Childish Dreams. Let's talk about negotiations, specifically the fine art of sharing a tankard for a future that looks about as predictable as knowing when the next plague is coming. Picture this. A peasant father, let's call him Cedric, to keep things simple, is nestled into his rickety wooden chair, one that creaks ominously under the weight of his hopes, dreams, and a healthy dose of ale. He's got hands more callous than your average rock climber, thanks to years of toiling in the fields, and today he clutches his mug as if it's the Holy Grail. That's right, every sip is more important than a night's quest. Sitting across from him is Harold, the kindly but perpetually confused neighbor. The two are about to embark on a most questionable adventure, the arranging of their children's future marriage. Because what's more romantic than striking a deal over the last remains of last week's ale? And make no mistake, this negotiation is as complex as a medieval grammar lesson with a fill-in-the-blank section. Cedric raises his tankard. To our children, may they one day multiply faster than the weeds in my cabbage patch. His grin is as wide as the gap in his work boots, and trust me, it's quite the spectacle. Meanwhile, Harold, in a rare moment of clarity, can't help but wonder if this arrangement is a genius move or a recipe for letting case after case of grim woes tumble upon them like a poorly built thatched roof during a storm. Right, he stammers, scratching his head as he contemplates a future where his daughter might end up as Cedric's daughter-in-law. What if they don't like each other? You know how children are. They'd rather play with mud pies than think about matrimony. Cedric nods. A fair point. But mud pies are just practice for the cake they'll have to sit through at their wedding, he says with a chuckle. already picturing the day when the potion of love is inevitably replaced by the question of whose mother-in-law is more of a tyrant in the kitchen. As they down another round, it's hard not to imagine the kids, little gem-swapping urchins, dreaming of the moment they'll escape from the clutches of adult expectations. Their conversation is just a mild echo of their future, filled with a mix of joy, laughter, and lots of moments wishing they had chosen the life of a wandering minstrel instead. Cedric leans in closer. Let's make a pact. If our children can't stand each other by the time they reach 7, we'll find a couple of goats to exchange instead. Goats are less picky and have better manners. Oh, that's sound logic. They practically butt heads for fun, Harold replies, raising his tankard in a toast. These are moments for the ages, moments where overfueled ale leads to plans that could ultimately affect the next generation. Whether chasing a goat through a muddy field or figuring out who sleeps in pillow fort provisions first, the children's futures are as secure as an acorn nestling into the chilly ground. As the sun sets, painting the sky with warm hues that would later be called suboptimal lighting for a pea patch, the two fathers know one truth. If their children can endure the trials of muddy socks and relentless goat butting, surely they can endure a marriage forged in the fires of awkward adolescence. And speaking of their charming offspring, what's with the endless chatter that fills the ears of parents like the incessant buzzing of a fly in a poorly constructed hut? One child's fascination with turnip extraction games is bound to be a hit, while the other's relentless pursuit of who can catch the most errant chickens provides a delightful distraction, more reliable than any court jester. It's like watching a rom-com centered on a mulch heap, fraught with all the laughter and chaos that only farm life can conjure. Let's take a moment to appreciate how similar you all are to these medieval peasants. Think of how often you've been roped into the fray of family decisions, only to think of an escape plan involving a distant land far away from the obligations of everyday life. Haven't we all sat around the table thinking, this meeting would be much better over a pint of metaphorical ale? Perhaps, as inches of conversation ebb and flow through laughter and bargaining, Cedric and Harold share a moment of silence, a rare moment of clarity in which they attempt to gaze through the fog of child-induced chaos to envision a brighter world. A world where their offspring raise their own families and attempt the same dodgy marriage negotiations, armed with the priceless warning: don't arrange anything after too many tankards of head-butting ale. And just like that, you can almost hear the faint sounds of squealing children, scampering farms, and the brief tussle of negotiating love against the backdrop of tragedy, misfortune, and divine humor coursing its way through the history of humanity. These are stories that never really change. As Cedric takes another gulp and wipes his mouth because napkins were a luxury reserved for noble birthright, and thinks there's absolutely nothing better than bargaining for children over beer, we realize this moral conundrum encapsulates the essence of relationships, tangled together like the beet harvest on a frosty morning. And just like that, the wheel of history turns. With a final clink of ale-filled tankards that brings to mind the echoes of youthful rebellion and overly ambitious family plans, we are left wondering, how does one even get roped into such an adventure? Purely over a cup of ale? Sleepy yet, dear listener? Chapter 4. Chicken Chase in the Muddy Yard. Let's shift gears and meander out into the delightful chaos of the farmyard, where ambition meets poultry, and both are arguing who has the better escape plan. Imagine, if you will, a crisp morning dew clinging to the ground like a desperate waiter trying to cling to their last bit of dignity in a mismanaged tavern. Enter our protagonist, a sprightly 7-year-old peasant child, blissfully unaware of financial arrangements, marriage deals, or anything resembling adulthood looming ominously like a dark cloud over a summer picnic. Instead, you find this child panicking, chasing a chicken that has, for reasons known only to the universe, and possibly the chicken, deemed this corner of the yard as its personal raceway. While you imagine this charming horror show, you might also recall a time when you attempted to catch anything. A busy train, your Wi-Fi signal during an important Zoom call, or perhaps even your child when they suddenly decide to use the front lawn as their Olympic sprint track. The child, fueled by the grilled remnants of a day-old crust of bread, charges through the squelchy mud with all the grace of a two-legged duck trying to tap dance. The rich aroma of the field's loamy soil mingles with the unmistakable tang of chicken manure, and somehow it presents a bouquet that's as awful as it is nostalgic. Every time the child lunges forward, the chicken flaps its wings in protest, a plume of feathers exploding like a bad magic trick gone awry, while the child's faded tunic becomes an abstract masterpiece of mud spatter. Just imagine. Here you are, reflecting on your childhood trauma of running around trying to be a hero, while the chicken embodies everything chaotic in your life, embodying the talents of someone who just might win a gold medal in how to look ridiculous at 7 a.m. You're probably wondering about the bread. Stale, crusty, and as appetizing as yesterday's snow. The child gnaws at it like a desperate farmer trying to appreciate what could easily be the last piece of sustenance before breakfast. Have you ever tried to have a meaningful conversation about life while chewing on a piece of something that could probably be classified as a weapon more than a food item? That's exactly what this child is doing. Blissfully tackling their adventure while simultaneously preparing for major dental work they don't yet know will one day come. Now, revel in the absurdity for a moment. Imagine taking this child aside and proclaiming, "Listen, you should really learn to negotiate better the next time your father and Harold are hammering out the business of your wedding over ale. Consider asking for, a decent bread recipe." Instead of embracing this sage advice, you'd find them diving headfirst to catch their feathered nemesis, blissfully unaware that their worries about the crust of bread are entirely misplaced. As the child zigzags between patches of mud, pilfered turnips peeking from the ground become additional threats to tripping catastrophically. Each poor vegetable left behind in an abortive plot twist. A lowly carrot remains, looking utterly betrayed as it witnesses its peers' fateful journey into a muddy oblivion. The ground squishes beneath their tiny feet, a sound equal parts delightful and horrifying, reminiscent of the ever-dreaded squelch you might hear just before stepping into a newly discovered puddle of mystery while wearing your best shoes. The chicken, meanwhile, seems to embody all the chaotic energy of a caffeinated bard trying to entertain. Every flapping wing could tell a story, a mischievous tale stained with the delightful hilarity of life. If you squint just right, you might even envision that chicken on an old parchment, proud and roguish, perhaps titled The Adventures of Sir Cluckington. But let's not forget about the other marvels of the peasant yard. The lingering scent of compost, forging a unique olfactory experience reminiscent of weekend picnics gone terribly awry. How did people come to appreciate stirring this concoction of aromas? Because walking outdoors without encountering something similarly rank could only lead to more earnest bartering over who can endure the less desirable of activities. Fighting off flies or stitching together their own tunic from barn scraps. Nothing like patchy crafting to set the stage for missed-love connections, right? Before you can unravel the comedic implications of a chicken suddenly doubling as a matchmaking device, the inevitable happens. Just as the child's outstretched fingers nearly clasp the rebellious bird, it appears that gravity was all for the chicken today. With a sharp flutter that can only describe modern disappointments, the creature evades capture and darts off into the sunset, or at least toward the neighbor's fence. With a deep, frustrated breath echoing the lament of all weary parents everywhere, our plucky champion collapses backward into the muddy ground, staring up at the vast expanse of a sky that doesn't care at all about the day's pursuits. That familiar feeling of defeat washes over you like losing a game of cards, but with worse stakes and possibly a chicken. So, dear listener, as you quietly drift off, remember this child lost in a dreamy deception of chasing feathers and silly ambitions. The life of a medieval peasant is riddled with absurdity and charming interruptions, half-hearted adventures, paving the way for fateful encounters and wedding negotiations that couldn't possibly live up to the wit and hilarity of today's story about failed chicken pursuits. And as you nestle into the murmur of life's daily chaos, let us remember, while love and loss may drive the heart, nothing is more relentless than a muddy farmyard, especially when it involves half-committed pursuits against crafty chickens. Rest well, for surely tomorrow holds another adventure, perhaps involving a goat. Chapter 5, A Lovable Tug of War. Congratulations, you've just woken up not in a luxurious suite or even a 2-star hotel, but in 1200s England, where all the comforts you've come to expect are exactly zero. Now imagine this: a small, thatched roof cottage, an exterior patched together like a desperate housewife's failed DIY project, with bits of straw sticking out at odd angles, some of them defiantly resembling overcooked pasta. A picturesque sight, only if you're a medieval art enthusiast who really likes the concept of rustic charm. As you take in this mortifying masterpiece, you find yourself sharing space with a weary peasant couple in their 30 who are more exhausted than a tavern keeper on a holiday weekend. Meet Athelstan and Mildred, who might just put the fun in functioning relationship, if only that relationship didn't come with a side of mud, grindstone, and a flock of noisy chickens that seem to have a personal vendetta against bedtime. You might ask yourself, what's it like to be in a union, forged from you seem okay and at least you have a few goats? The truth is, it's a delightful disaster. Imagine if you had a roommate who was also responsible for your well-being and possibly your survival, but who also frequently forgot to pick up their socks, or in this case, their daily burdens of freshly harvested turnips. Ah, that charming abode, mirroring the couple's current states, patched together but functional enough to ward off the elements most of the time. The walls creak like an old ship at full sail, but hardly ever manage to actually keep the wind out. Let's be honest, it's less a structure and more a cozy fortress against reality, with an open invitation to the local rodents and an assortment of pests that make for better company than the farmers themselves. As they sit at their rickety wooden table, you can almost hear the silent conversation of survival echoing between them. Athelstan, with his cap of wheat straw hair and bags under his eyes that could serve as practical satchels, looks at the breakfast table laid with hold your applause 2-day-old loaves of bread, a staling masterpiece of medieval baking. Mildred, meanwhile, eyes the bread suspiciously as if it might sprout legs and join in on their breakfast debate. She knows that if Athelstan says he can mold it back into shape, there's a strong possibility breakfast will look more like bread dough gymnastics. Now picture the sounds coming from their rustic kitchen, a blend of creaking wood, the sizzling of lard in their ancient skillet, that nobody can confirm is actually lard, or just an eternity's worth of accumulated mystery grease, and a faint track of their neighbor's goat trying to break into their shared granary as if it's got a better recipe for breakfast. Ah yes, romance in the Middle Ages had a charming twist. What's for dinner and will it fight back becomes an engaging question, pointing directly towards the lovely possibility of tossing last night's stew to their hen neighbor, Henny McCluckface. Is love really just a bag of potatoes and a not-so-reliable bucket? You ponder, observing Athelstan and Mildred's playful jabs at one another. It's like a medieval version of marriage counseling taken with a grain of salt, literally, because their pantry inventory consists mostly of salt-rationed goods, and they've been able to barter for, while trying to avoid angry livestock on their daily run for more bread, which, spoiler alert, is always stale. On the day-to-day dramas of their union, dreams of practical love arise. At least we both agree that last week's turnip stew was a culinary experience we may never repeat, murmurs Athelstan, gnawing on his crusty bread. As he does, a few little bits of stale bread manage to leap from his mouth, adding to the bumpy landscape of their kitchen table a sort of edible representation of their relationship, both hearty and on the verge of being past its prime. Mildred rolls her eyes and fires back with a quip about how much she looks forward to the new foodie trend of burnt bread. It'll be all the rage. Our neighbors won't even know it's just yesterday's disappointment. And with that, the battle lines of banter are drawn once more, as light-hearted jests form the glue holding their patchwork life together. But should you feel a twinge of sympathy for this lovely couple, let me assure you, their relationship is wrapped in layers of humor sharper than any medieval peeling knife. They face an unyielding set of challenges, long workdays, sick cattle, and the never-ending quest to keep their roof intact. They've tasted the kind of bittersweet love that even the harshest of winters couldn't freeze. Now, imagine them trying to connect in the quiet moments, nobody flirting with romance, while wrangling chickens sidestepping the matter of getting dinner. Do we think a goat will take us for a romantic evening? Athelstan muses, as if a goat might make for a better dinner guest than some of their human counterparts. And if you thought their day would only continue spiraling from the bumpy charms of their existence, stay tuned. Because the clash of mundane reality mixed with absurd domestic routines leads to one inevitable truth: they wouldn't have it any other way. As the couple bickers over the details of how many times exactly they can recycle yesterday's stew without losing their sense of propriety, the real question hangs in the air, with a scent of chicken feed wafting through the windows. Who will win the ultimate battle of whose turn is it to fetch water? So, dear listener, as you tuck into your own blankets and let the rhythm of sleep whisk you away, remember this charming medieval couple amongst patched walls and stale bread. Romance might just be a 3-day-old turnip away. Rest well, for tomorrow you may find a goat has some surprisingly pertinent advice on matters of the heart. Chapter 6, The Adolescent Grind of Grit and Grease. Congratulations, you've just clocked in at dawn in the year 1200, an era where the word comfort was as foreign as a unicorn in a stable of horses. You might have hoped for an awakening filled with joy, sunshine, and a gentle breeze, but alas, you are instead greeted by the lovely aroma of damp straw mixed with something suspiciously reminiscent of burnt goat hair. Welcome to the life of a medieval peasant, particularly an adolescent one. So let's focus on our protagonist for the day, a young lad named Edric. Edric doesn't just epitomize the awakening struggles of adolescence. He embodies them with a bent back and a heart full of ambition, ambitions that seem to primarily revolve around surviving another day of toil in the Lord's expansive fields. Picture this: a kid who dreams of stardom, but instead finds his face permanently dusted with mud, thanks to repetitive faceplants caused by skipping over rocks in the row. Ah yes, the daily grind. Edric rises with the indistinguishable dawn, a time of day more dreary than hopeful. His bed is a patchwork of straw, blankets, and the occasional stowaway rat, making the whole experience akin to sleeping in a time capsule of discomfort. Imagine trying to snuggle into a pile of laundry post-banana encounter, and you're getting close. With a groan reminiscent of aging livestock, Edric tosses aside his quilt, more accurately, a collection of very confused fowl feathers, and prepares for a day in the great outdoors, specifically in a field that is likely less green and certainly more exhausting than it's been sold to him. As he ventures out, the sun fights its way through the clouds, casting an uncomfortable light over the fields that shine like 1,000 mediocre paintings of medieval grass. Edric's stomach growls louder than a troop of starving wolves. Yet breakfast is the stuff of dreams, something akin to yesterday's leftover porridge, desperately hoping to pass as today's gourmet dish. Ah, the culinary masterclass of medieval cuisine. You could say it's where the phrase "beggars can't be choosers" finds its true calling. As Edric trudges toward the fields, imagine him witnessing the beautiful chaos that unfolds daily, a surefire spectacle of indigestion and broken dreams playing out in the distance. His fellow peasants wave at him, faces shadowed by the weight of their day's labor like weary warriors heading to battle, except their swords are hoes and shields are old wooden buckets. Delightful, and if laughter were currency, they'd all be rich. If only money didn't also seem to be a distant reverie, reserved solely for nobles who think the term backbreaking work refers to laying on a lush divan while somebody else tends the fields. Each day in the life of a medieval peasant was like running a marathon that never quite finishes. Edric is armed with nothing but a worn-out tunic and perhaps a sense of humor sharper than his gardening implements. But let's talk about these fields. They stretch for what feels like an eternity, an expanse filled with crops that seem more determined to choke him than nourish his belly. Weeds and brambles are sprinkled throughout the plants like nasty little reminders that life is rarely fair and never easy. As Edric works, there's a sacred art to whacking down weeds. First, you chant soothing words to the plants, as if they're going to listen. Maybe a gentle "sorry" or "do you mind?" works its way through the air. The true challenge, however, is trying to get back up again. The process of bending over can feel like a full contact sport every time you pop back up. Your creaky joints sound like the creaking of the village tavern's ancient door. Do you need a chiropractor? Absolutely. Do you have health insurance? Ha! Dream on, buddy. Here's the thing. How many times have we heard a parent or an adult tell you that hard work builds character? Edric shakes his head. He's got more character than a Shakespearean play at this point. Each swing of his hoe becomes an exaggerated dance move, all the while avoiding the clutches of hungry insects that seem to think his arms' fluid motion are invitations for a free buffet. The atmosphere buzzes with a cacophony of sounds, the cawing of crows debating the level of Edric's success, a distant cow mooing its discontent about being part of such a talkative community, and, of course, the delightful squeak of the ancient wheelbarrows, all of them eerily synchronized to Edric's grunts. This is not just farming. This is requiem in the land of grime. In those moments of short-lived triumph, when Edric manages to uproot a particularly resilient weed as if it's some sort of gardening trophy, he can't help but fantasize about the fine life of nobles perched on their lofty seats of luxury. Must be nice, he mutters. A feast of roasted duck sounds better than yesterday's primary food group, stale bread with a side of hope. He pauses to consider if hopeful bread would be less stale. It's a philosophical quandary every true adolescent peasant faces. But alas, a loud shout pierces this delightful reverie. It's the Lord Steward, a character so prickly and dour even the pigs around him seem to sulk. Edric returns to the realm of harsh reality. In this land, time is waged in labor. and swings of the hoe yield a currency very different from the actual coin. Edric's day will turn from toil to turmoil the moment he tries to impress a local girl during the afternoon gathering, perhaps by showcasing his significant skills in weed whacking while trying to ignore the growing pile of manure lurking nearby. Because ultimately, what every young peasant needs is romantic validation served on a dirt plate with a generous drizzle of low stench. In short, life is anything but subtle for young Edric, a dance of charm and discomfort, ambition overshadowed by agricultural absences, and endless opportunities to question the universe while plucking weeds. So, settle in, dear listener, as Edric dreams of merrier times amidst all the muck. Remember that sometimes mastering the art of survival really means mastering the art of laughter through the grind of existence. And who knows, perhaps a goat might casually offer him advice on his next daring pickup line. Sleep well, and leave the weeding to Edric. The masters of humor are quite good. Thank you very much. Chapter 7. The Churchyard Nuances of Matrimony. Hey guys, welcome back. Prepare yourselves for a journey so romantic, it might just make even the most cynical souls swoon. Though in this case, swoon might just mean fainting from the sheer absurdity. Tonight, we're diving headfirst into the medieval world. A time filled with love, loss, and about as many comfort options as a muddy pit. I hope you're ready, because we're about to explore a scene that's colder than the reception you'd get from someone realizing they've accidentally liked their ex's Instagram post. Picture this: a humble village churchyard in the 1200s, where the only thing that smells worse than the ancient timber is the lingering scent of last week's sheep sacrifice. That's right, folks, it's wedding season, and the guest list is decidedly limited, mostly because nobody wants to stand close to the altar's special aroma. But before we kick things off, do me a favor, like, subscribe, and maybe comment down below something you'd find downtime for in this very rustic nuptial saga. But only if you actually enjoy this. You know, no pressure. Now, dim those lights like you're attempting to hide a poorly conceived haircut, and let's get comfy, because we're stepping into the 13th century, where love is a battlefield, and the armor is a bit more worn than one might hope. Ever wondered what it would be like to pledge your everlasting love while standing in a cow pasture? Or how about checking the marriage banns in a churchyard that's more mud than grass? You've got questions, and I've got answers, though the only thing guaranteed is that no one thought to bathe before coming here. How romantic! Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1200, beneath a simple wooden cross that creaks like your great-uncle's cranky knees. Standing before you is Father Anselm, the village priest, more accustomed to reading tattered scrolls than witnessing dramas of the heart. With a voice that could make even a stone statue question its existence, he prepares to read the marriage banns, that delightful Monte Carlo of potentially awkward unions. The churchyard is an arena where joy and awkwardness collide like runaway chickens, and today it is the stage for the latest performance of As the Wedding Turns. Picture Father Anselm, decked out in robes that look stitched together from various livestock remnants. He squints at the crowd, a real who's who of peasant life, but with half as much charm. You can almost hear the collective anticipation mixed with the occasional cough of suspicion. What's at stake? Merely the bleak union between Egbert, a local farmer with a dream of owning more than one pair of shoes, and Mildred, whose greatest accomplishment is not tripping over her own feet while carrying a bucket of water. As Father Anselm clears his throat, though not as thoroughly as he probably should have, you envision something akin to an epic movie reveal. The villagers lean in, noses ready to sniff out scandal like bloodhounds hunting for fresh mischief. Will Egbert stumble over his vows? Will Mildred drop the wedding ring into the pig trough? Dearly beloved, Anselm begins, we are gathered here to unite this couple in holy matrimony. And just like that, the air thickens with anticipation. Or perhaps it's just the collective remnants of sheep and damp wood lingering piquantly in the atmosphere. Let's take a moment to marvel at the sincerity of this sacred promise. In modern terms, it's about as binding as a wet piece of toast. Love in medieval times often meant someone's farm was slightly larger than your neighbor's. Romancing a potential partner was akin to bartering a cow for cheese. Honestly, if you looked at marriage contracts from this period, you might wonder if Mr. Darcy himself could handle the logistical catastrophe that these unions involved. As the priest drones on, you can't help but consider how this compares to your own wedding planning. Odds are, you didn't need to battle with whether the pigsty was an appropriate place for a reception. And if you had a banquet, it probably didn't consist of bread rolls forged from dried mud and a charmingly questionable duck dish that had more adventurous flavor than any backyard barbecue you've ever attended. Anselm gets to the part where he needs all the villagers to act as witnesses, a shamelessly awkward gathering that resembles a lineup for a secret police operation rather than a celebratory affair. Hushed murmurs float through the crowd, each peasant raising an eyebrow with the kind of skepticism you reserve for food prepared by someone using only one hand. But wait! Before this delightful event can continue, an unexpected guest arrives. It's old man Wilfred, the town's professional party pooper. His arrival is akin to dropping a soap opera bomb. He hobbles in, cane in tow, with wild hair that seems to have retreated from the rest of his body, creating a unique aura of, I haven't groomed since the last plague. Though the unwilling messenger of doom, Wilfred has one mission, to remind everyone that Egbert might still harbor a soft spot for Therese, the tavern maid with a smile brighter than the church's dim candlelight. The villagers gasp because nothing screams romance like a side of potential scandal. So, Anselm says, a bead of sweat forming on his brow like an unnecessary punctuation of tension. If anyone knows of just cause why this couple should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace. Pause for the dramatic effect, complete with a snicker from the back of the crowd. Suddenly, you're reminded that even amidst the trials of love, nothing can quite shake the simplicity of medieval absurdity. Because in this fairy tale, the chapters are handled more like tragic comedy than Shakespeare. The plot twist is less happily ever after, and more let's keep those goats away from the wedding cake. So, as Father Anselm attempts to regain order, the air feels dense with confusion and a delightful mix of awkwardness. Life, dear listener, is a wild ride, especially in the churchyard, where marriage is a blend of convenience, miscommunication, and whatever the village has on sale that week. Let's take a moment and settle back into the chaos. For in the heart of this comedic medieval mess, we find the very essence of life. Love may come with its awkward antics, but so does laughter, and maybe a side of sheepdom if we're unlucky. Sleep well and dream sweetly, hopefully, of weddings far more charming than today's. Chapter 8, The Strained Eyes of Companionable Toil. Hey guys, welcome back. Settle in, dim the lights, and prepare yourself for a story so relatable, it'll hit you right in the existential dread of your daily grind. Tonight, we're exploring love in the medieval age, not the kind that makes you dream of candlelit dinners and soft kisses, but rather the kind where a couple's idea of romance is making it through a potato harvest without losing a finger to a rogue pitchfork. So go ahead, find your most comfortable spot, preferably one that's not full of unpaid bills or that reminder of your last diet attempt. I'll wait. Are you there? Excellent. Now, let's take a moment to reflect. What does true love even mean in a time when the most innovative form of communication was tossing a note on a pigeon's leg? Ever imagine trying to woo someone with nothing more than a muddy tunic and an abundance of turnips? Romantic, right? Let me take you to the bustling village square, where joy blends seamlessly with exhaustion. Because you guessed it, you've just woken up in the year 1200, at the peak of the high medieval era, a time known for grand castles and glorious battles. Spoiler alert. The real drama is taking place in the dirt-splattered fields surrounding you. In the distance, you can see a peasant woman deeply tucked away into her world of fatigue. Her name is Agatha, but you can call her Miss Hardship. As you gaze into her tired eyes, currently the size of wilted cabbage leaves, you realize that her daily reality is about as romantic as watching paint dry on a fence made of splintered reeds. Let's take a moment to truly appreciate those hollow eyes, shall we? Agatha is a veteran of love and loss, a gladiator in the arena of everyday life. As she stands there, you can almost hear her internal monologue. Ah, love. It's like the last piece of bread. Hard to find, easy to lose, and somehow always sitting below a mound of conflict. Do you hear the distant sound of laughter? A pair of elderly couples pass by, grumbling about turnips, whilst grasping one another as if adulthood itself were trying to pry them apart. Mr. and Mrs. Hargrove, two souls whose commitment is embodied in aching backs and a shared disdain for their neighbors' raucous goats. Did you ever think marriage would turn you into a live-action episode of Last Man Standing? Agatha certainly did. Yet, she observes their jaded semblance of companionship with a sparkle of both hope and resignation. You see, companionship back then was a fine balance of heavy sighs and unwavering loyalty. Picture it. You wake up before the sun, darker than a medieval love poem. Your day starts with milking a cow that is both uncooperative and sassy. Your only conversation partner is old Bessie, who may or may not have developed a personality that rivals a grumpy aunt. Half a turnip for your thoughts, she might sarcastically bleat, while you clutch your aching fingers, pondering if a divorce from chores would be a more modern solution. But Agatha, our weary observer of matrimony, ultimately laughs off this notion. The reality of it all is that these elderly couples were doing more than just passing time. They were surviving hell together, a joint venture into toil. Nothing says eternal love like planting seeds in mud alongside a partner who's spent decades moving sheep from one side of the pasture to the other. As Agatha leans against a rickety fence post, she watches their weary exchanges, insightful, yet mundane. Mrs. Hargrove brushes dirt from her apron while Mr. Hargrove squints suspiciously at their neighbor's rapidly growing cabbage patch, as if it carried the secrets to the universe. Perhaps they're using enchanted fertilizer, you imagine him exclaiming, voice dripping with incredulity. And yet, it becomes evident, these older couples found a peculiar comfort in each other's silence. They've perfected the art of unspoken communication, long gazes that say, "You've stolen my last piece of bread, but I guess I'll forgive you." Can't relate? Imagine sharing Netflix accounts with someone who's committed to watching every bizarre crime documentary while you secretly yearn for the latest rom-com. As Agatha surveys the bleary-eyed couples, you realize there's a darker undercurrent at play. Behind every pair of interlocked fingers lies a tapestry woven with loss, hardships, and the unending pursuit of that elusive happily ever after. Romantic, isn't it? After all, who needs grand romantic gestures when you can spend life united in a less than exciting struggle to feed a brood of hungry children? But surely love must come wrapped in some semblance of joy, right? Maybe over an exile of joyous potato soup that's almost edible, or a well-earned blanket fight over the last piece of straw to sit upon. Life and love in medieval times were less about fiery romance and more about the minutiae of enduring ever-present trials alongside someone who inexplicably puts up with your quirks. And so, dear listener, we find ourselves basking in Agatha's retrospective. She dreams not of fabled knights or ladies of the court. No, her heart is transported to a mundane yet oddly comforting prospect. Enduring companionship that smells faintly of livestock, inevitable backaches, and the unyielding emotional burdens that life throws at you. Truly, nothing says romance like bonding over an icy winter evening spent huddled around the nearest hearth that has received just enough splinters from a recent firewood collection. So take a deep breath, let your eyelids droop with the weight of these whimsical life lessons, and let thoughts of sheep and knee-deep muck carry you into a peaceful slumber. Because, at the end of the day, love may be a complicated union of shared toil, but isn't that what makes life mildly interesting? Sleep well, dream sweetly perhaps, of a time when companionship is as cozy as a hay bale and twice as charming. Chapter 9, The Golden Lure of the Grain. So here we are, in the stillness of a late summer's day in 1200, staring at a field of wheat that is positively bursting with golden potential. Welcome back, dear listeners, where today we delve into the arduous balance of romantic aspirations and sheer survival that defined the lives of our medieval ancestors. Imagine these vast fields not just being symbols of abundance, but as the backdrop for a ceaseless competition reminiscent of a reality show. Asterisk the Hunger Games, but with more hay and fewer arrows, asterisk. Picture it. A sun-soaked, slightly overqualified wheat field that beckons you with the promise of sustenance, love, and dare I say, a less moist place to sit down with your bread. Wheat was the currency of life, the very foundation upon which not just meals but relationships and entire familial legacies were built. You might be tempted to ponder, what could romance possibly look like against the backdrop of impending harvest? Especially when the biggest gift you could muster might just be last week's soggy crust of bread. As you stand there, feeling the soft rustle of the wheat brushing against your hungry legs, you can't help but think of Agatha again. This time, she's not just a weary observer, but a participant in the grand dance of harvest, a dance where you're more likely to trip over your own foot than impress anyone with your finesse. Ah, the seasonal love, you imagine she muses, sipping from a pitcher of what may or may not be fermented cabbage juice. Nothing says I'm invested quite like sweating in a field for the chance to share half a loaf of bread with a smitten farmer. The sun continues its relentless watch as Agatha, dressed in her tincture of dirt and determination, stands ready to reap. Just imagine her gripping that scythe, which is far less artistic than it sounds. It's a rudimentary tool, really a more dangerous cousin of the garden rake, likely to leave your fingers in a state of perpetual regret should you miscalculate your swing. Who needs tinder when you've got a scythe? The real thrill of romance lies in impressing someone with your skill and not dismembering yourself. But, dear listeners, love is a slippery, wheat slope. As Agatha makes her way through the fields, you can almost hear her inner monologue narrating the drudgery. There's nothing like the smell of slightly burnt grain to really ignite the flames of passion with a prospective partner. You can imagine her daydreaming about the charming blacksmith down the road while balancing the hopes of their future fairy tale life against the dusty reality of potential plague and unending toil. You may be wondering how the mood in this field shifts from the sweet scent of impending bread to the bitter aroma of lost dreams. Well, imagine facing a dilemma. Should you harvest the crops meticulously, or should you take the time to engage in a delightful tete-a-tete with a potential soulmate? The choice is about as clear as boiling soup on a rainy day, isn't it? Alas, the scythe's extreme efficiency can only take you so far. Every swipe through the wheat leaves you breathless, just like the thought that the charming blacksmith might be snatching glances at the neighboring farmer's daughter instead. Frankly, what's a girl gotta do to catch some attention? Better show off my crop harvesting skills. Your heart races for love, and the golden grains are inextricably linked. When the heft of a wheat bundle has your heart racing, at least you're burning calories. On the other end of the field, the local lord has decided to come for a stroll, wearing more fine silk than is practical for a harvest. Naturally, this causes quite the stir. Suddenly, it's not just resourceful harvesting, but an impromptu fashion parade. Agatha rolls her eyes, fighting the urge to wear her mud-stained tunic as a badge of honor or a cleverly crafted protest against aristocratic nonsense. That's right, Lord Lindblossom. I'll take my dirt stains over your silk frustrations any day of the week. She scoffs in her imagination, of course. Yet the reality is far more fantastical. In this semi-harvest-induced reverie, Agatha finds herself lost in absurdia. She dreams that a hero will swoop in, dramatically discarding his own scythe for a grand gesture. Oh, the romance, you chuckle softly, picturing him spouting flourishes about the wheat being the lifeblood of their world, while Agatha secretly wonders if they'll ever get past the dinner of burnt porridge. Oh, the irony of it all. This, as of now, silent courtship does not end in a symphony of love ballads, but more like that awkward moment at the dance when nobody quite knows how to take the first step. Relationships in the fields were as tangled as the crops themselves, each intertwined stalk representing commitments, disappointments, and the occasional hope. Ah, love. Eventually, as dusk drapes its warm embrace over the land, it's eerily reminiscent of the sense of fulfillment that only comes from just scraping by another day. Did Agatha achieve romantic glory? Was the wheat harvested? Or was the entire evening spent in a melodrama of potential love and unquenched thirst for satisfaction? The golden allure of wheat may hold the promise of gratitude tomorrow, but tonight, it leaves us with just more eligible farmhands with potential, who may need a little more seasoning or a bit of encouragement. So, let that solemn thought drift you off. Hay bales are nestled in the corner of your mind, a reminder that while love might be as complicated as wrangling a runaway goat, at least tomorrow promises a fresh start, another day of harvesting hopes, and an always unconventional quest for companionship. And as you settle into a gentle slumber, may your dreams be filled with fields of gold, laughter, and the absurd joy that only comes from knowing that love can bloom even in the most questionable of circumstances. Chapter 10. A Feast of Stolen Glances Beneath the Oak. Ah, dear listeners, as we drift deeper into the annals of history, let's momentarily pause to feast on a lunch that could only be described as medieval. Picture yourself lounging beneath the sprawling branches of a gnarled oak tree, the sun filtering through the leaves, casting playful shadows on the ground. Your fellow peasant companions, sweat slick and dirt dusted, have gathered here not just to escape the sweltering sun, but to transform humble rations of bread and ale into a mystical experience of the senses. Welcome to the medieval picnic, where gourmet-level expectations meet very low culinary realities. Imagine the delightful aroma of slightly stale bread wafting through the air, while the atmosphere crackles with rumblings of laughter and hunger alike. Yes, that's right. Nothing says "I adore you" quite like the scent of dry crust and a hint of something that might, in another life, have once resembled meat. If the bread looks like it doubled as a weapon, congratulations. You've secured an authentic medieval meal. As you engage in the delicate art of sandwich making, essentially cramming the last vestiges of food between two hard slices that have seen more days than you'd care to count, you can't help but catch sight of a curious figure across the way. Oh yes, there sits your potential love interest, a vision of rustic beauty, eyes glinting in the dappled sunlight like freshly polished misfortune. Is it a mirage? Could this be love at first lunch? Your heart races faster than a pig fleeing the butcher. Between mouthfuls, you dare sneak a glance, hoping that the alchemy of hunger will transform him from a mere mortal into an irresistible catch. What do you think he sees? Breadcrumbs cascading down your tunic, or the truly charming way you're attempting to maintain dignity while fighting off a persistent wasp? Trust me when I say that medieval flirting often revolves less around eloquent poetry and more about the effective dodging of buzzing insects and the possibility of dramatis personae, dinner abstainers. The glorious oak tree graciously provides shade, but it's also the stage for a drama more riveting than any you'd find in the Lord's castle. The potential love interest, let's name him Harold, is currently engaged in a frantic, somewhat attractive bubble of crunching, munching, and wiping ale-stained hands on his already suspiciously dirty hose. It's enough to make you question if he'd mistaken the midday meal for a competitive eating contest. Just imagine how this interaction unfolds. You look over again, catching his eye for a brief moment, and in the noise of crunching and faffing about, there's a flicker a moment that could either change history or lead directly to you wiping ale foam off your chin. And yet, here we are at a crucial crossroads. What do you even say? Hello, my name is John and I'm proficient in peasant bread, acrobatics. Or perhaps, I hope you enjoy your meal. It may or may not double as a weapon. In the spirit of adventure, perhaps Harold is equally enchanted. He's busy staring at you too, probably, pondering how someone can look so enchanting while trying to eat something that resembles a rock. The medieval art of conversation was often misunderstood. It was presumed that stuttering and pausing when talking could be interpreted as charm. Just then, a wayward gust of wind sweeps through, ruffling your tunic as though expecting to present you in your best light. Ah, the fickleness of Mother Nature. It reminds me of those pesky first dates in the modern world where you're trying to impress while also contemplating the logistics of not spilling your drink in the midst of well-timed banter. Is it just me? Or does being awkward transcend time? The scene sharpens into focus sounds of joyous banter, laughter mingling with the crunch of bread and a few too many whoops as bits of food escape onto the dirt below. Nearby, children are sticking their grubby fingers into bits of stew left to simmer on the embers of a fire. And there's Harold trying to look suave while unsuccessfully picking out the flies from his ale versus tuning into your lost sheep anecdote. And as the sun inches further across the sky, you realize that time is of the essence. Amidst the laughter and competition for crumbs of an exceedingly uninspiring meal, something magical happens. Connection. Love, even as chaotic as this lunch has been, is sprouting amidst the fetor of unwashed garments and the worry that perhaps tomorrow's meal might still involve yesterday's goat. Suddenly, you're seized by romantic courage, an idea striking you like a newly hallowed turnip. Maybe, just maybe, you could share a morsel of your bread like a grand offering, or engage in a witty exchange about the tastiness of fermented cabbage. The stakes have never been higher. So as the afternoon drifts on, filled with hearty conversations, punctuated by laughter, remember, love may not always bloom in grand ceremonies with flowing silk and well-cooked meals, but often it starts with two people stealing glances over stubborn loaves of bread. There's a certain romance derived from shared misery, from tender moments carved out of otherwise mundane circumstances. And as the sun sinks below the horizon, may this whimsical acknowledgement of connection provide the perfect comfort as you snuggle into sleep. Dream sweetly of that oak tree, the sounds of unassuming love resonating in the background, and the warm prospect that love, by any absurd means necessary, awaits in the crevices of life's most ordinary meals. Now drift into slumber, dear friends, knowing that during your waking hours, the mundane may hide extraordinary possibilities if only you dare to glance and share your bread. Chapter 11. A sip of ale, a touch of fate. Ah, dear listeners, as we drift into the heart of our tale, let's take a moment to envision the bustling chaos of a medieval harvest. You find yourself surrounded by the vibrant thrumming of life, rowdy peasants, laden carts, and an overwhelming aroma of freshly cut wheat mixed with a hint of sweat and, let's be honest, perhaps a little too much body oil. Yes, my friends, in the 1200s, Personal hygiene was about as fashionable as a cow corral at a royal banquet. Here you are, having just harvested a grain that could be mistaken for a caffeine-free breakfast option. But victory, you've earned a moment's pause to catch your breath, yes. Another excuse to consume more ale. That wondrous drink that every peasant claimed was a food group all its own. One could argue that beer has transcended mere beverage status and emerged as a medieval miracle cure, the antidote to labor aches and existential dread alike. Now, picture the scene. The sun hangs low in the sky, casting a golden hue on the field, illuminating swaths of hard-working peasants who take their moment's respite with practiced revelry. The laughter flows as freely as the ale, and hooting and hollering seem to punctuate the harvest like a rustic opera for the hard of hearing. And amid this raucous jubilee, you catch sight of her, your sweet neighbor, Annabelle, a vision in her dusty, kerchief-adorned glory. It's hard to miss her. She has the kind of earthy charm that makes you forget about the prospect of another week eating nothing but boiled turnips. As you watch her dodge a particularly aggressive wasp, one can't help but feel that love is in the air, or maybe just the slight aroma of something that might times have once been bacon, lingering from last week's feast. Ah, the joy of human connection amidst the often grim realities of peasant life. What could be more romantic than sharing a tarnished wooden cup of ale, that humble chalice of joy? As you pass the cup between you, your hands lingering just a moment longer than socially acceptable, you can practically hear the celestial choir serenading you to Hallelujah. The aged wood feels rough against your fingers, and the heady scent of hops and, well, questionable fermentation wafts tantalizingly from the cup. And just like that, with a single touch, you become acutely aware of your unfortunate lack of personal grooming. You hope that Annabelle is too focused on the laughter around you to notice that your tunic is starting to resemble a patchwork quilt of hard labor and yesterday's stew. Would you like a sip? The words tumble out, and you internally berate yourself for sounding like a poorly rehearsed bard. There's a moment of silence. It feels like an eternity, and ominously, it reflects the awkward pauses of every medieval drama you've ever witnessed. But rejoice. She smiles coyly, her eyes sparkling like dew on a field. Only if you have a spare, good. Sir, she replies, and just like that, you've entered some sort of peasant courtship dance, with cups being the figurative swords used to parry and thrust in the name of attraction. Is this what romance used to look like? It's like a game of who can socially misstep faster, with stakes remarkably low, though neither of you would admit that, especially not with the price of ale today. As you sip from the cup, the strange bonding through shared beverage transforms you both into something akin to ale-soaked warriors, ready to take on whatever calamity awaited next. A crop failure, a tax collector, or God forbid more turnips. Between giggles and sly glances, you both unknowingly craft a moment that will surely echo throughout the annals of medieval romance. It's an enchanting time where even the mundane transforms into the extraordinary, all through the simple act of sharing a cup of ale. Now, let's take a moment to appreciate that another farmer has overexercised his ale-carrying skills and spilled his drink all over the nearest hay pile. This serves as a spectacle, blending noise with the delightful scent of spilled liquid bread. Does this chaos not remind you of a Friday night gathering, where one enthusiastic participant tends to perform a swan dive into nachos instead of gracefully partaking? But oh, the night promises even more. Your fingers briefly brush against Annabelle's hand as you exchange cups once more, and that lingering touch ignites, sparks possibly from the ale, or perhaps because you've been standing in the sun too long. Is this what poets would call the magic of connection? In that moment, both of you become aware that discomfort and hilarity often form the glue of every medieval romance. Were you at last week's village meeting? You ask, consuming some of the comfortingly dull topics that are the bread and butter of peasant gossip. I thought we might have to start a war over who left the door open leading to the ale storehouse. She laughs mirthfully, tossing back her hair, a majestic wave of wheat-colored strands, untamed and glorious, akin to the very crops that surround you. You'd think folks would learn to shut a door when every sip counts, wouldn't you? Her playful tone enchants you, and you find yourself wishing you had a bevy of poems tucked into your doublet, ready to serenade her. Instead, all you can manage is a chuckle with crumbs still stuck on your tunic. With the sun casting longer shadows, the village merriment swells like the tide, a sea of laughter mingling with the challenge of the future's uncertainties. You both sip your ale amidst the laughter, nestled comfortably between the worlds of hustle and absurdity. And there you find peace within the madness, love, however awkward and chaotic, begins to blossom like wildflowers in unexpected places. So, as the evening burgeons with ridiculousness and potential romance, may the echoes of your laughter guide you into sweet dreams this night. Drift into slumber, knowing that even in the most unexpected of circumstances, love and laughter are woven together like a pair of mismatched socks in a medieval laundry basket. And trust me, that's a connection worth dreaming about. Chapter 12. Tales of Love and Ale in a Peasant's Hearth. Let us now step quietly into our rustic tavern, where the air is thick with the scent of fried dough and the joyous sounds of questionable singing. The walls are so close you might instinctively think they've been put there to preserve your sense of personal space, which is, of course, an illusion. The flickering glow of a single tallow candle dances back and forth, casting shadows that make everyone look just slightly less haggard than they actually are. Imagine it a room so crowded you could mistake it for a grain storage facility, only with more spilled ale and fewer rats gnawing on the sacks. Inside, tired peasants amble in from the frigid realm outside, faces weary yet alight with the joy of a well-earned evening repast. You, my friend, have just pulled up a stool that has seen more questionable encounters than a medieval matchmaking service, and you eagerly listen to the tuneful, though often ragged, serenade of old, love-stricken ballads. These songs, bubbling over with emotions ranging from soaring romance to dashed hopes, tell tales of lovers long lost and enduring affections, a topic that's either deeply profound or hilariously misinterpreted, depending on how many tankards of ale you've consumed. Over yonder, you overhear a stout farmer's hearty chuckle as he gestures with an index finger nearly caked in whatever was on his last meal. Did you hear about Earl's daughter, Maud? Turns out she fell in love with a commoner. The crowd gasps, a melodrama unfolding as epic as any ballad, albeit far more entertaining. Said she liked the way he worked the plow. Who knew a farmer could be so charming? The laughter roars, a ripple of camaraderie humming through the room as these tales intertwine like a tapestry missing half its threads. You take a moment to appreciate this atmosphere before you, feeling the damp wood of the tavern's rough-hewn tables press against your elbows like a cozy embrace, or maybe a prison sentence. Combined with the wafting scent of something that might have once been a roast, unfortunately, it's hard to be sure at this point they create a setting that is almost magical. Almost. As if the fates align to allow a gathering where merely surviving the day is worthy of celebration, albeit with a side of breadcrumbs in your beard. Remember the last harvest festival? A woman's voice rises, bright with enthusiasm yet lined with the timbre of years spent worrying about pests and turnips. When old Toby tried to dance with last year's prize Pumpkin, I swear that Pumpkin was a better partner. The room erupts in laughter, the kind that spirals up into high-pitched cackles, the sort that seems to ask, how do you still find joy amidst the potato blight? As you lift your own tankard brimming with ale more precious than a noble's jeweled goblet, you can't help but wonder, how does a medieval peasant even define love in times of daily toil? Picture yourself attempting to woo someone in your current state, still covered in dirt from the fields, and with breath that could quite convincingly resemble a barnyard after a rainstorm. How romantic! You can almost picture it. Hello, my lady. Fancy a stroll through the muck? Or shall we simply toast to our future brood of goats? The crowd roars with ludicrously witty retorts about their heartfelt, or heart-splattered, romantic tribulations. And what of that dreadful squabble between Gwendolyn and Liam? Another boisterous voice calls, filled with dramatic flair. Oh, you know. It's a classic tale. She tried to bake him a pie, and instead cooked a rock. I hear he still has it on display. He calls it the Stone of Broken Love. You could say it's rock solid. Cackles punctuate the air, and you can't help but chuckle along, even as you sip your drink with haste, hoping to stay as sturdy as that rock pie. In the far corner, a sage-like elder leans in close, with a conspiratorial twinkle in his eye. Listen, young ones, if your true love doesn't bring you a jug of ale before dusk, does that love even exist? He bursts into raucous laughter, and you can only nod in agreement. Try not to spit your beverage from the sheer hilarity of this insight, because at the end of the day, what is love if not a shared tankard and perhaps the smell of fried turnips hanging around you both? Amid all this joyous chaos, you catch glimpses of pairs exchanging glances, the budding romances sparked amidst the rough and tumble of tavern life. As you notice Annabel catching your eye from across the bustling room, you embark on a quest to successfully navigate the labyrinthine path to her side without tripping over a wayward chicken or stepping on a rogue heel. The evening continues to bubble with an intoxicating blend of hilarity and heartfelt confessions, laughter punctuating every awkwardness of existence. The bartender, a man whose beard looks like it might house an entire ecosystem, lends some wisdom. Remember, love is like ale brewed well. It can warm your soul. Brewed poorly, and it'll leave you with a headache and questionable memories. A highly relatable tragedy indeed. As you settle into this atmosphere, it dawns on you that even in the lives of medieval peasants, love and loss twine together like the worn threads of a common tunic, some moments marred with sorrow, others overflowing with the joyous absurdity of a shared tankard raised in laughter. This is the dance of life that will carry you gently into your dreams. So, dear friends, with a heart full of raucous tales, slightly muddied socks, and a belly contented with a frothy pint, revel in this moment. For it is here, in the sleepy corners of a crowded tavern, that we find warmth in each other's stories, humor seen through the lens of our shared humanity, and love sometimes as fleeting as a good summer ale flowing through even the most rugged of hearts. So let the sounds of chuckles lull you into slumber, and let the absurdity of it all cradle you gently along your way to dreamland, where perhaps you'll find that elusive pumpkin partner after all. Chapter 13, Father Anselm and the Temptations of the Night. Let's step into the night, shall we? A time when mystique curls around every flickering candle like a persistent cat. Nobody asked for it, but here we are. In the midst of this medieval village, you find yourself standing outside a church, cloaked in shadow. The moon glimmers overhead, making it seem like the universe itself is rolling its eyes at the follies of man. Or perhaps it's just a gleam of polished skulls, the ones that are accidentally included in the parish's decor to remind you that life, or should you say, love, has its share of mortal repercussions. As the villagers shuffle away, drunk on poor ale and even poorer decisions, you can hear the deep, resonant voice of Father Anselm echoing from the stone walls. Picture it. He stands tall in his tattered robe, illuminated by a lantern whose light dances like it's possessed by a particularly mischievous spirit. With his sparse, wild hair, he closely resembles a particularly distressed bird, one that has yet to discover what self-care means and finds itself perpetually nesting in a rainstorm. Beware the whims of the heart, he booms, finger wagging like a stork with a vendetta. For just as a foul-dreamed turnip may wreck your belly, so too may unholy love wreak havoc upon your soul. You can almost hear the collective sigh of the villagers as they murmur under their breath. He's not wrong, of course, but there's something oddly comedic about worrying over soured romances when one's still struggling to feed the chickens. The villagers gather around, feigning seriousness, but with a glint of mischief in their eyes. Here's the thing about medieval peasant life. When you can't control the weather, famine, or that one neighbor with a goat who yodels at 3 a.m., you direct all that pent-up faux anxiety into something utterly absurd, like debating morals with a group of half-soused compatriots. Picture a tavern brawl about who last kissed the baker's daughter, while she, blissfully unaware, uses her spatula to wield power over dough. Father Anselm raises his voice further, igniting a spark that could drive the soberest fool to question their own life choices. Temptation is as slippery as an eel on a greased slide, my friends, he warns. Let not your hearts stray towards the sordid affections cast upon fellow denizens, for one missed glance could leave you drowning in tributaries of debauchery. You'd swear his voice reverberates off the cobblestones, causing wild echoes that scare the local cats into the shadows. Imagine gathering up all their thoughts, all their awkward, intimate moments, and tossing them into a communal cauldron. Stick a ladle in, and you'd serve a hearty stew of chaotic love, mixed with more regret than the last Harvest Festival's experimental cheese. Now, how does one even navigate love in a time where expressing affection feels akin to, surgically, extracting a tooth without anesthesia? Consider that, instead of texting "you up," you might need to send a carefully crafted message via carrier pigeon. You fumble over your words. Fancy some pig slop this evening? Isn't quite the romantic overture many were hoping for. As you ponder these thoughts, the village feels alive, playing out its drama like a farcical play where the costumes have never been washed. And then there's the matter of temptation. Picture the villagers sneaking out after hours, a banquet of woes marinated in sweet, sweet rebellion. They say no to Father Anselm's cautionary tales as they chase the nearby river. What do you think they talk about as they wander together, wading through gently flowing mischief? Using metaphors that could rival those of a bard, you can easily envision a drunken rendition of sonnets, poorly recited with slurred consonants and grandeur that only someone inebriated on homemade mead could muster. But wait! The sound of two lovers secretly sneaking glances throws a twist into the night. Ahmed, did you hear? Yvette kissed Bernard behind the hay bales. Just last week, a crude whisper ripples through the crowd. Everyone exchanges eyebrows like unspoken secrets, their minds racing faster than a rooster at dawn. How could anyone dare to romance between scarce fields and shoddy rooftops? Surely, that kind of shenanigan was meant for nobles, lofty as they sometimes appear on their pretentious steeds, right? As you step to the side and find a shadow behind a creeping vine, you become an unintended witness to the village's joyous, albeit chaotic, dance around love. The banter flows freely as Father Anselm continues to preach from his stone altar. Yet you can't help but see the absurdity. A man warning against the very impulses that keep life interesting, almost like a baker telling you not to touch the warm bread fresh from the oven. Good luck with that. In the midst of it all, the aged stones of the church begin to tell their own stories, each creak and groan a relic of humanity's eternal struggle between duty and desire. The night wears on, the stars twinkle with a knowing glance, and somewhere nearby, the faint sound of clucking chickens musically questions the very nature of fidelity. Ah, Father Anselm. A paradox in a cloak. Eager to safeguard the morals, yet merely a heartbeat away from captivating everyone by simply being himself, a jumbled mess of wisdom and dubious attire. So remember, dear listener, love in the Middle Ages wasn't about glorious ballads sung under moonlit skies. It was about surviving both the seasons and the unpredictable, dare we say, absurd nature of the heart. As the vibrations of laughter and longing wrap around you like a warm cloak, let them guide you into that sweet twilight of dreams where even the impossible can bloom. Chapter 14, The Wedding of Winds and Wobbly Vows. Hey guys, welcome to another exciting adventure that's about as straightforward as a wind-tossed haystack. Tonight, we delve into the thrilling yet mysteriously comical world of medieval weddings, a ceremony where love isn't necessarily in the air, but rather the stench of boiled cabbage and the ominous threat of a goose gone rogue. So dim the lights, crack open a window if you can, but not too wide. You don't want the local wildlife barging in, and get comfortable. But before we go gallivanting down the aisle, let's ponder a few questions that you might find amusing as you plummet through history. Like, what exactly qualifies as a good gift in a world where the best haul is ideally half an ox? Or imagine standing before a rough-hewn altar, contemplating whether a ring made from sharpened bone gives you that special glow. And what about post-wedding festivities? Do they involve dancing, or does that just involve dodging the occasional cow pie? Spoiler alert, it's probably both. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the 1200s, where love is currency, and reputation is the sole form of social media validation. As you blink your eyes open to see the morning dew reflecting off a rough wooden altar, you find yourself in a quaint village square filled with grumbling humans who are way over-caffeinated from the local mead. Ah yes. Today's the big day. Let's check in on the happy couple, probably far too optimistic about what marriage will bring. Let's talk about the ceremony, shall we? As you shuffle closer, you can't help but notice the priest, looking uncomfortably like a scarecrow in a tunic, with a slight hint of stale bread stuck to the hem. This is Father Ulrich, a man so committed to spreading the word of the Lord that he's genuinely convinced he can marry people through sheer force of will. With his wiry frame perched atop a modest step, he casts stern glances at the congregation, who are barely keeping upright thanks to the combined effects of bad cider and an unshakable urge to giggle. Feel the crisp air tinged with the scent of freshly churned butter, laced with a hint of something distinctly off. That's the aroma of the sheep who decided to take a nap right there in the middle of the festivities. Father Ulrich clears his throat and prepares to launch into his marriage enrichment sermon, which is less encouragement and more a warning about what to expect on the other side of the altar. Today, he starts, voice booming like an angry ox, we unite these two noble souls beneath the watchful eyes of God and this particularly passive-looking sheep. The laughter bubbling from the crowd echoes unsettlingly around the court, and a few children fight to stifle their snickers by feigning interest in the patch of dirt they've just discovered, earthy and existential at the same time. Now, if there's one thing that heralds the frailty of human intention, it's the exchange of vows. Here we have our bride, Elisha, the daughter of the village baker, with a face that could light up a dimly lit barn. She looks at her betrothed, a man whose most significant accomplishment thus far has been lifting heavy things without breaking a sweat. "Do you, Geralt of the back-breaking labor," Father Ulrich inquires, "promise to love, honor, and protect Elysia against the hunger of the night and the sudden abduction by a wayward goat?" With all the seriousness of someone declaring their favorite vegetable, Geralt nods enthusiastically, as if pledging his heart isn't nearly as daunting as lifting a particularly obstinate sack of grain. "I do," he shouts, nearly losing his balance and giving Father Ulrich an unforgettable snapshot of his wedding day smoothie. Next, the priest turns to Elysia. "And do you, Elysia of the delicately sliced bread, promise to support your husband with your unwavering love, your unparalleled baking skills, and occasional good humor when the relatives drop in unannounced?" Elysia chuckles, waving her hands like a magician performing an awkward trick, and affirms, "As long as he doesn't leave his socks lying around." The audience bursts into laughter, momentarily forgetting their own dreadful weddings past. Yet, as this very earnest wedding unfolds, you can't help but note the stark contrast of expectations versus reality. Marriage in the medieval world is less about romantic getaways and candlelit dinners and more akin to sharing a life of endless chores, rivalries over who brings the best vegetables to the communal stew, and convincing that one neighbor to stop allowing their goat to roam freely, making your backyard a premier grazing spot. After the rather wobbly vows, there's the breaking of the bread, a lovely custom intended to symbolize breaking into a new life together, which is also the exact moment you learn that no one should ever bake bread with one hand while holding an excited toddler with the other. You hear the thud from the back of the crowd as the poor cake, more an untamed loaf than a proper confection, meets the dirt before anyone gets a chance to say, "I do," or "Why didn't we hire a proper baker?" As the sun begins to dip behind the thatched roofs, casting women's curls into picturesque golden halos, you spot the crowd filing out of the village square and heading toward the local tavern, because what else do you do after pledging your undying love in front of an audience reeking of livestock and bad decisions? A dance party, of course! It's a spectacle where even the most rhythmically challenged peasant can make an appearance, spinning wildly to the beats of a lute like their livelihood depends on it. Little do they know, their dancing has inspired the invisible kingdom of frustrations that marriage brings where two become one. Wallet-draining unity amid the pop and crackle of an uncertain future. As you take a step back and witness this topped-off chaos, it makes sense, doesn't it? Marriage in the medieval world wasn't some perfect fairy tale. It was a wild mash of labor, love, and the occasional resentful sheep butting in with unsolicited commentary. And so, dear listener, embrace the story of medieval love, where every awkward glance leads to a dozen unexpected twists, and every loaf of bread is a reminder that you can't make it unless it rises. So as you drift into dreams filled with swirling daisies and reluctant geese, let these thoughts tickle your subconscious one day. When you least expect it, you might just find yourself at the altar of your own surprises. Chapter 15, A Hearth of Hopes and Humble Beginnings. Hey guys, welcome back to another night of mildly fascinating history that's about as comforting as a lukewarm bowl of stew. Tonight, we're settling into the chilly bones of a medieval peasant's love nest, better known as a wattle and daub hut. Think of it as a cozy shoebox with an impressive ventilation system, more effective than any trendy fan you could find at the local market. So, grab your favorite blanket, dim the lights, and maybe take a moment to ensure your current living situation is indeed better than that of our cabbage-loving medieval friends. Ever pondered what it must have been like to cuddle up in a drafty hut with your partner while grappling with the harsh realities of peasant life? Can you imagine how the romantic evenings might have been filled with laughter while they meticulously dodged the occasional rodent? Or, more perplexingly, what exactly does one say during intimate moments when their bed is composed of straw with just a side of stubborn bugs? "Oh, darling, your breath is like a bouquet of turnips, and, oh, you have a little something in your beard, let's say, a flea. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the 1200s, nestled in the heart of a humble village. The cool morning air fills your lungs, and your new home lays before you, a small, earthy structure adorned with a hammock of straw, mud-caked walls, and the alluring scent of yesterday's dinner mixed with the essence of livestock. Welcome to marital bliss. Let's talk about your new abode. It is about as spacious as a closet and boasts a living arrangement harmonized with the rhythms of nature, or perhaps more accurately, the whims of livestock. Picture it. As you open your eyes, the first thing you notice is a sky full of warmth, yet a room full of chill. That's right. Your home is the perfect temperature for frostbite. The walls? A lovely blend of wattle and daub that's mud and straw for the uninitiated, which makes you feel a bit like a rabbit tucked snugly into a burrow. Yes, homey as it sounds, imagine the mildew. These walls aren't merely for aesthetics. They're equipped with charming gaps that allow the cool breeze to waltz in, whistling tunes of past loves, while carrying with it a waft of something distinctly pungent. Ah, yes. Nothing sets the mood quite like the musky scent of sheep mixed with the stale aromas of a week-old stew. Talk about aphrodisiacs. Now, let's dive into the centerpiece of your new life together, the hearth. It would definitely win in a fire hazard competition if such a thing existed. It's a cozy spot where all your hopes and fears flicker to life like a candle trapped in a shaky wind. Here, you'll gather not just for warmth and light, but also to engage in the timeless dance of culinary campsites. Your daily diet will revolve around cooking over an open flame, so get comfortable screaming, "You call that cooked?" at your slightly charred dinner. Ever tried roasting a rat? Presumably, it's the medieval equivalent of a Michelin-starred dish. You'd want to get it just right, because nothing says romance quite like sharing the dinner table with an awkwardly charred rodent while discussing the weather or the likelihood of an impromptu goat invasion of your living quarters. Oh, but the sleeping arrangements. Those precious few hours of suspended disbelief in my house is a den of bugs bliss. Imagine an oversized wooden frame stuffed with straw, your luxurious mattress. Bed bugs? An inevitability. Sheets? Those are merely a dream deferred. The comforts of modern bedding are about as distant from this place as a stable can be from a palace. Remember that time you tried to fix your mattress with a few extra pillows? Instead, picture yourself adjusting straw as if you are training for a marathon in the art of discomfort. And romance? Oh, dear listener, forget about dimming the lights for an intimate heart-to-heart. How does one evoke passion in a well-ventilated chamber that echoes more with the sound of livestock than whispers of love? A good night's chat often consisted of, "I really appreciate your unwavering support through this endless plague of fleas," or "Do you love me enough to barter our neighbors for a better mattress?" Ah, true love indeed. Yet, amid the strife, our peasant couple, Elysia and Geralt, share silly glances and unfortunate chuckles as they navigate through the uncharted waters of peasant life. Picture them in earnest discussions about the latest drama in the village and how the pigs seem to band together against them. It's humor born of hardship, shared over the prospect of the day's dinner, under an unceremonious wooden beam that likely has more character than the two of them combined. And every evening echoes with the sheer absurdity of it all as they settle down, the stars shining down with an apparent disinterest in their plight. Together, they embark on the epic saga of love amidst the relentless march of chores and earthly troubles. After all, surviving as a couple in the Middle Ages is no small feat. It's as though you've joined a vast reality show. Only whoever gets the most mud on their face wins. And the prize, of course, is mere survival. So, dear listener, let Elysia and Geralt remind you that the bonds of love, forged in the fires of hardship and the swirling winds of uncertainty, can thrive even when stacked against a backdrop of straw and a fierce band of rodents. Embrace the absurdity, and as you drift off to sleep along with our couple, may your dreams be filled with warmth, wit, and perhaps a few escaped goats. Chapter 16. The Allure of Crust and Companionship. As we settle deeper into the rickety rhythm of medieval life, let's pause for a moment, just long enough to acknowledge one of the most underrated pleasures of peasant existence: a shared meal. Yes, dear listener, often this would be nothing more than a mere crust of bread, but it transcended far beyond its humble origins. Think of it like a magical portal, opening the door to companionship, and in this case, the true currency of love. The ability to smile over the scraps. No, really, look closer. This is what our couple Elysia and Geralt become most adept at. Now, imagine this moment. In the flickering light of their meager hearth, you might almost see the shimmering shadows darting about, like the very rodents they often chase away. The warmth of that fire curls around them, sneaking into their bones with all the subtlety of a cat burglar snatching a half-eaten turnip from a nearby table. There they are, nestled together on their straw-stuffed mattress, an emotional theater fit for high drama, except, of course, the only icing on their proverbial cake is the crust of bread they grapple over. Have you ever fought a sibling for the last slice of pizza? Welcome to the medieval equivalent, where the stakes feel remarkably lower, but the laughs are tenfold. Ironically, in this universe where even a crust feels like a gala affair, the look on their faces is priceless. Elysia might raise an eyebrow, an expression that screams, "Are you going to finish that?" While Geralt, perhaps after a long day of dodging goats and negotiating with grasshoppers, answers with a wearied yet endearing smile. But be warned, dear listener, during such moments of tenderness, one might imagine that true romance blooms. "Thank you for sharing my crust, darling," Geralt would say, a smile creeping across his face. "You know, this meal is almost as good as that time I caught a soup beetle." Such charming repartees could light a flame of affection greater than the burning embers of their fire. Ah, soup beetles. Now that's a dish fit for kings, or at least medieval peasants tired of rat. Yet, in the face of the beastly comfort of crumbs, what lays upon their heads is a mental montage of a feast fit for a lord. Perhaps Elysia dreams of roasted goose, while Geralt hums a tune of stewed carrots and wild boar. But before you sink too far into that culinary reverie, let's clarify. Whatever romantic meal they dream of, it's far removed from the reality of what shares their supper table. Interestingly enough, breaking bread together was one of the many wonders that solidified their bond. It's an impressive feat, sharing a meal in close quarters, surrounded not just by memories and laughter, but also by the small army of pests whose living arrangements were far more opulent than their own. A memory quite ingrained in Alicia's mind comes to mind. "Oh, Geralt, remember that one time we mistook a flea for seasoning? Those were the days. In the world of medieval kitchens, nothing is very predictable, is it? You might accept a small morsel of crumbly bread, not knowing that a rather audacious mouse just chewed the exact spot your fingers land. Each bite is an adventure, every crumb a reminder that, come what may, they're still together banding tightly over the precarious nature of their sustenance. And oh, how their imaginative minds convey warmth. Here's Geralt offering Elysia a crust, a gesture far richer than gold. This is for you, my dear. May it nourish your spirit as much as it fills our bellies," he declares grandiosely, all while subtly hoping she ignores the fact that those very crumbs came from the bottom of a sack used for feeding livestock last week. They might even partake in a mild bit of roleplay, where Geralt might dramatically declare, "Behold, a feast fit for a lord." While gesturing to the very crust, they both cherish a comedic performance in a playhouse made of mud and straw, creating laughter that swirls around them, binding their hearts closer together. And therein lies the secret, dear listener. While castles tower in the distance and nobility struts about in dazzling tapestries, Elysia and Geralt hold the most extravagant banquet where it truly counts the heart. Sharing a crust of bread is not a mere act of satiating hunger. It's a sacred ritual wrapped in all those tangled, absurd moments they find themselves in. As you drift deeper into slumber, imagine the camaraderie of enduring the brunt of medieval living. Imagine sharing a crust of bread and all that it signifies, partnership amidst adversity and humor blossoming from hardship. Let the laughter of Elysia and Geralt echo softly in your mind, curling up like smoke from the hearth. The absurdity of it all, the pests, the crust, and the tender moments shared is a lullaby for the ages. So, as this chapter closes, let yourself cradle the warmth of companionship, and know that even in the strangest of times, it is a shared meal, a smile, and a bit of absurdity that make life mildly interesting indeed. Chapter 17, Winter's Embrace, a Lure of Frostbite. Hey guys, welcome back to our cozy corner of the internet. Tonight, we're diving into something colder than your ex's heart. Winter as a medieval peasant. That's right, the kind of winter where getting out of bed feels like a death sentence, and frostbite appears to be auditioning for the lead role in your life story. Now, imagine waking up to a landscape so white and fluffy, you'd swear Mother Nature had just dumped a mountain of powdered sugar on everything. But I promise you, sweetened dreams will be the last thing on your mind when you find yourself face to face with the brutal truth of medieval winter. So, before we hop back in time, please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting, but only if you actually enjoy this little trip down hilariously horrific memory lane. Trust me, you'll be thanking your pillows for cushioning your very modern existential crises once we're through. Now, let's set the scene. What kind of insanity makes a medieval peasant look at a snowbank and think, great, just what I needed, an endless supply of misery? You ever tried scraping frost off a nose so chapped it might as well have auditioned for The Walking Dead? Or maybe, how about getting out of a cozy, wool-stuffed bed that feels remarkably like a tomb while everything outside is freezing in its own dramatic performance? Every morning, a new chance of becoming a medieval popsicle. Ah, the joys of winter life, right? Congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 1200, where winter doesn't merely make appearances. It lives in your house, breathes down your neck, and occasionally moonlights as your worst enemy. As you blink your eyes open, you'll notice that if the temperature could talk, it would be whispering sweet nothings about hypothermia. As you sit up, gaseous clouds of breath puff out like tiny white dragons trapped in the cold. Your thatched roof cottage stands there, looking as tiny and vulnerable as a cheese wheel in a mouse convention, completely overwhelmed by the relentless cold and ferocious hunger following the recent harvest failures. The walls are actually a noble's best joke, wattle and daub, paired with a bit of a mud-smeared charm designed to keep out, well, not much, really. Did you think your windows were drafty? Oh, dear listener, those medieval peasants might have rolled their eyes at your so-called cold. Their homes greeted the wind with open arms and happy little howls like a kid, discovering they can howl back at the moon. Every draft felt like a ghost slipped through those sappy seams, chilling them to their very bones. To get warm, you'd have to pile on your wool tunics, every one smelling suspiciously like a goat that just ran a marathon. And guess what? Life is a party when you can choose between freezing to death or getting cozy with your livestock. Yes, folks, living quarters were not designed for personal space. You'd find yourself huddling with chickens and maybe one particularly unenthusiastic pig who had decided it was their time to make human acquaintances. At night, the bed you share with the family is nothing more than a pile of straw and perhaps a few lingering flea friends that might have settled in for the long haul. Now, let's talk about food, or rather, the deep existential contemplation that arises from discovering that your larder looks more like an abandoned children's art project than a source of sustenance. As winter drags you through its frosty coils, you may find your pantry stocked with ancient turnips and a lingering hope that tomorrow could be better. Very much like your last Tinder date. Spoiler alert, it usually isn't. Oh, the songs of hunger rise louder than the winter winds. Every bite of that sad slice of black bread could become an enthralling tale of courage to share, urging Geralt to fight valiantly over the last crumb like a medieval low-key gladiator. Honestly, just imagine folks gathered, staring bravely into the abyss of empty bellies, and then coming together for a heartwarming chant of maybe tomorrow. Picture it, as the bitter wind claws at the roof's straw, and snow fills the air like confetti at a particularly chaotic birthday party. Could winter be crueler than your childhood memories of waiting for pizza delivery? The answer is yes, and you can bet that every frozen crumb in that cottage whispers sweetly of untold treachery. But back to that frozen landscape, what if we could compare the view to a lovely winter wonderland in a fairy tale? Not quite, huh? It's more like stepping directly into the set of Survivor, Igloo Edition. Frost pats your cheeks like an uninvited relative, and it feels like Mother Nature is testing your resolve, as well as your wardrobe choices. Now, don't you dare think that brittle snow is the only hurdle of the season. As darkness descends, you'll also battle with nighttime absurdities that include roof leaks from melting snow that turn into stunning little ice sculptures on the dirt floor. Art installations made by no one and yet everyone. Because why not? To sum it up, dear listeners, surviving winters as a medieval peasant is about creativity and relentless optimism. And as you begin to let your mind drift towards dreams of mildly interesting historical significance and frostbitten laughter, just remember one thing. When life gives you snow, pack it down and hope it doesn't freeze you solid, at least not before your morning turnip stew. So, breathe deep. Allow the chilling reality of medieval life to warm you with its humor. Feel free to smile in your sleep as Elysia and Geralt navigate their frosty world, stylizing their love amidst the absurdity of frigid existence because, in the end, laughter is the warmest blanket of all. And so, with your thoughts swirling like a snowflake to the ground, let yourself nestle deep into the frosty embrace of winter and drift gently towards those sweet, absurd dreams. Chapter 18, A Mother's Whisper, The sickness beneath the hearth. Hey guys, welcome back to our cozy corner of the internet. Tonight, we'll weave a tale warmer than the slightly bitter herbal tea downed by a medieval mother whispering sweet nothings in the soft glow of a smoky hearth. Now, let's talk about something that's as charming as a bad haircut. Sickness in the 1200s. Picture this. You woke up, not to the sound of chirping birds and sunshine, but to a symphony of coughs, sneezes, and the occasional pitiful whimper of a child too sick to rise. Kind of makes you appreciate your morning coffee, right? The kind of coffee that probably won't come with a side of plague, thank you very much. As we cast our minds back to this simpler yet somehow infinitely more complicated time, just know you're diving into a world where a sniffle could mean your doctor is called. And by doctor, I mean a guy named Harold who once spent a week observing frogs and declaring himself an expert. So, before we plunge deeper into this tale, please feel free to like, subscribe, and comment, but only if you genuinely enjoyed this particular spin on life and death in the medieval world. Trust me, your comfy bed is very grateful you'll be drifting off afterward. So cozy up, draw those blankets tighter, and dim the lights unless of course you're trying to spot the myriad germs swirling around your very modern home. Ever wonder how medieval parents comforted their little ones rattling with fever? Did they use hot water bottles? Ha! More like they wrapped them in an ancient tunic that had seen one too many sneeze attacks. Talk about recycling. Now, imagine waking up in the year 1200 among those very real worries. The bite of the cold, the flicker of the hearth casting ghostly shadows, and the intense worry echoing through the straw-strewn room. Congratulations, you've just settled in to become a temporary medieval peasant parent, clutching your toddler against your side, surrounded by the comforting yet ill-smelling aroma of smoldering wood and whatever pot was left simmering on the central fireplace. Let's talk about the scene laid before you. That small, smoky hearth is doing its best, but with smoke like a surprised chimney sweep having a bad day, it wraps the room in a hazy fog. And there you are, furiously whispering little prayers for health and a change of fortune. Because let's face it, spirits at the local tavern are feeling chipper about drowning sorrows, but not so much about curing them. The flickering flames light up the room, revealing your little one, bundled up like a sheep in a wool sweater. You instinctively check their forehead because since when did all medieval mothers turn into walking medical diagnostic units? Do they feel hot? You ask yourself, pondering whether this means another round of doom or just that they were overly enthusiastic about last night's cabbage stew. In a world where sickness looms larger than your neighbor's daily relentless complaints about the mud stuck in their slippers, every cough and fever can feel like a dark spell. It's like a bad sitcom where the punchline is always tragedy. You'll find yourself pondering, do I need to invest in a poultice? Maybe some herbs? A flying carpet would be nice. But alas, you're stuck in the reality where the only herb on hand is the random sprig of thyme growing just outside that you might have also used to season last week's turnip stew, that is, if you found the motivation to season anything. So while you focus on your little one's labored breaths, your body is set against the chilly walls, adorned with skies of twinkling stars, when the stars are actually tiny drafts sneaking in from hastily patched up cracks. You catch the sound of distant laughter and singing from the village tavern, where happy souls gather to forget their trials over runaway turnip prices. It's like watching a live play where you're not even invited, and that hurt resonates deep within your tired heart. Oh, and while you're lost in thought, your mind conjures up nightmares of the local healer, a crone who is more interested in lacing your home with potions made from questionable ingredients like that ill-fated frog watcher of earlier. How many of her remedies have resulted in cure that turned into something that felt eerily like that childhood game of what's for dinner, but in a game where everything is inadvertently poisonous? Now let's pause for a moment. On the other side of your drafty cottage, your neighbor is fervently burning herbs in a desperate attempt to ward off the sickness. Spoiler alert. This usually ends with more smoke and fewer actual results, but that smell sure leaves an impression. Meanwhile, you're left contemplating the practicalities of herbalism. When was the last time a wilting flower solved an ailment? The mid-morning chatter between you and the various pots you hold dear reveals acute, lethal ignorance on your part. After all, you might be risking a respiratory illness yourself because of all that herbal steaming. As the corners of your mind settle into reverie, the reality is quite sobering. Children's laughter requires more than the meager rations of yesterday's bread. And how frustrating is it that within each sigh, you can't be like a medieval genie, waving a magic straw-filled wand to whisk sickness away. But instead, today, you're stuck navigating the worn ropes of parenthood, stitching together hope from morning prayers in the flickering shadows over that grim hearth. So snuggle up, dear listener. Let the trials of medieval parenthood swirl into your dreams like the airy tendrils of that hearth smoke, carrying you to an absurdly comforting place colored with warmth, love, and just enough irony. And as you breathe in the chaotic blend of history and humor, picture yourself as a cozy, loving figure bound to change in a world where sickness and love exist in the constant tug-of-war, just like you and your resolve to find a good night's sleep. As you drift towards slumber, remember, the absurdities of life may make it hard to breathe sometimes, but laughter is the only potion that truly wraps you in warmth. Chapter 19. A tear in the soil, the weight of loss. Hey guys, welcome back to our cozy corner of the internet. Tonight, we're digging deeper literally and metaphorically than a medieval peasant's shovel can reach, exploring something as heavy as the pie you just regretfully finished, the grief of a parent in the 1200s. Now, imagine this. It's winter, the air is crisp like stale bread, and you're about to engage in a task that teaches you more about loss than you ever wanted to know. The ground is frozen harder than your neighbor's stoic glare after you borrowed too much turnip juice without returning it. The scene ahead would make even the most stoic of hearts feel a pang more profound than a bad seating arrangement at a wedding. As we journey into this melancholy yet strangely relatable moment, forget about lighthearted rom-coms or feel-good stories. Tonight's tale, dear listener, is like a medieval drama, minus the catchy theme song. So, kick off those heavy boots, grab your favorite blankie, and perhaps a mild sense of your own familial attitudes, and let's prepare to trudge through the sorrow-laden ground of a heartbreak that cuts deeper than a poorly executed pun. What kind of thoughts would swirl in your mind as you stand over that small grave, your heart heavier than a sack full of turnips? Seriously, what do you even say to a tiny cloth-wrapped bundle? Sorry it didn't work out? Would you offer a snack from your meager rations, like some sort of medieval comfort food? Here, have a crumb of my stale bread. Fabulously ridiculous, right? Congratulations. You've just woken up in the year 1200. And spoiler alert, you are now stepping into the most sobering of scenarios. As you shuffle into view, it's clear there's a solemnity in the air, thick as the fog creeping through the graveyard that could probably use a good air freshener or at least an awkward joke. Let's set the scene. The ground beneath you is an unyielding slab of frozen earth, a reminder that life is both fleeting and quite literally hard. You feel the chill seeping into your bones, not just from the cold, but from the bittersweet reality of loss. Around you, the skeletal trees stand as silent witnesses, their branches reaching toward the sky like arms begging for understanding or perhaps a cozy hug. This isn't your average Sunday stroll, after all. As you kneel down beside a freshly dug hole, your heart beats like a drum jingling a sorrowful tune. You wrap your arms around an empty silence, remembering laughter that once echoed through these parts, now reduced to a whisper carried away by the icy wind. It's a moment that makes you realize being a parent in the 1200s was a bit like trying to juggle flaming swords while walking a tightrope made of overcooked spaghetti. One wrong step, and everything comes crashing down. With each shovelful of dirt you throw, memories tumble alongside. What were the sweet, imaginary conversations you didn't get to share? The bedtime stories that will never be told. It's as if the earth is conspiring to keep them from you, locked away beneath layers, perfectly timed with the frustrations of your day. I mean, how often do you think about how hard it must be to explain loss when the very concept of mortality was as familiar to you as that pesky neighbor who keeps borrowing your last turnip? And then, just as you're about to drift too deeply into woe, you feel laughter bubbling up the irony, lurking in the most absurd of moments. Isn't it wild that right around the time you're feeling this massive weight of grief, a few of your village buddies might be literally stumbling home from the tavern, no doubt with their heads full of ale and tales of loves lost? To them, your little loss would be less a thing to ponder and more a fleeting thought as they focus on who just dropped a pie on someone's head. What a ridiculous contrast. You bury one tiny soul, and they can't remember to stop their friends from clowning around. It's as though the universe is playing a very ironic game of tug-of-war, balancing your heart's deep sorrow against the festive absurdity of drunken village exploits. Honestly, might you be the one who keeps it all together? Perhaps, during your next beer-infused conversation, you'll turn the sadness into the punchline. Remember when we both lost our sober minds? As the chill bites through your tunic, your thoughts drift. Do you think the village would remember to celebrate the tiny life lost? Would they whisper sweet nothings of the hearth about how this little one touched your heart for a brief moment? Or would they inevitably devote more attention to the inevitable deer roast feast planned for next Sunday? Your fate, it seems, is a footnote in the ongoing saga of peasant life, a comically sad detour in the pea soup road of life. The frozen ground seems to absorb your reflections as the momentary bitterness gives way to acceptance, or maybe just an acceptance of the absurd. You rise from your knees feeling somewhat heavier yet oddly lighter. A new perspective nestles somewhere between laughter and tears. While life is fleeting, it carries on in a way that's cheeky and poignant, all at once, much like an old friend showing up with a hit of nostalgia you didn't know you needed. So, as you shuffle back away from that hallowed spot, with dirt underfoot and maybe even a tear in your eye, remember this. It's the absurdities of life that wrap us up, just like your threadbare blanket. And while you may wrestle with sorrow, laughter is still sitting there, grinning like a half-turned wheel of cheese, waiting to join you in your next bizarre adventure. Now, take a deep breath, let it linger a moment longer, and just like that first cozy sip of herbal tea, prepare to drift into a sleep filled with both heartache and humor, sweet dreams woven into the very fabric of our heavy human existence. Chapter 20, No Rest for the Wicked, A Nightmare in Peasant Slumber. Hey guys, welcome back to our little corner of the internet. Tonight, we're diving headfirst into a realm darker than the bottom of a medieval stew pot sleeping in the 1200s. Imagine trying to catch some Z's while the ghosts of poor decision-making and chronic back pain swirl around like an enthusiastic polka band. But before we embark on this nocturnal adventure, let's indulge in some peculiar questions. Ever wake up in a cold sweat and think, did I leave the oven on, but swap oven with the peasant's livelihood? Imagine a medieval version of that panic. Waking up in a mud hut, wondering if that last turnip was indeed the last turnip. What happens when you sleep through your neighbor borrowing your goat for a midnight stroll? The thrill of uncertainty must have been exhilarating, like trying to ride a unicycle while juggling rotten tomatoes. So, if you're ready, well, ready-ish to snuggle into your blankets and make your way back to a time when a good night's sleep was more of a fantasy than a reality, dim the lights, find a cozy nook, and maybe sprinkle a little more hay on that bed of yours. Congratulations. You've just woken up in the middle of the 1200s, where the idea of comfort was as elusive as a clean pair of socks. Let's talk about sleep, or the lack thereof. The night air is thick and oppressive, just like that nagging feeling you get when you remember you forgot to reply to your mother's text from 3 weeks ago. Outside, the wind howls with the ferocity of an angry goose, rattling the rickety walls of your humble abode like a drunken Viking at someone else's wedding. You roll over in your straw-filled sack bed, half convinced it might swallow you whole. Your bed isn't so much a cozy nest as it is a fortified bunker, lined with a tapestry of fleas and mysterious odorous remnants of last season's grains. Ah, the luxury of medieval peasant life. You toss and turn, your thoughts just a chaotic jumble of worries and questions, like a bad tavern brawl, but no one quite remembers where it started. Suddenly, you bolt upright in the dark, heart racing like a chicken during a thunderstorm. Had you just heard a wail? Is it the wind, or the neighbor's goat again? There's something inherently frightening about sleeping in an era where no one invented a word for nightmare. Back then, bad dreams had to be a symptom of improperly cooked gruel, or perhaps a sign that you'd offended a local witch with your subpar wool spinning. Your mind races back to the troubles of the day, like trying to keep your crops from being eaten by a particularly gluttonous family of rabbits. You recall the grumpy baker glaring at you because you were one loaf short of a full order. How could you let this happen? You think, unable to fathom your next snackless journey to the market, half wondering if other peasants dreamt of pastries while you suffer through stale bread for eternity. The more you think about it, the more absurd the whole plight becomes. In today's world, people have sleep masks, white noise machines, and pillows that cost as much as a small goat. But back then, your best shielding against the night's terrors was either your faith or a curtain made from a dusty sack, hopefully thick enough to keep the fear out. Each creak of the floorboards or gust of wind started feeling like the universe's cruelest prank, some cosmic joke that had you chuckling nervously between your desperate attempts to drift off again. You recall your day's exhaustion, a thorough weathering of toil while harvesting crops or perhaps lugging water uphill, reminding you that even in the depths of your dreams, physical fatigue still better be turning out to be something. Because the last thing you needed was a twisted leg waking you up all night with a complaint as if your own limbs signed a petition to strike against your laborious choices. Just when you think you've managed to calm the raucous thoughts in your head, you feel it. The pulsating thrum of your heart is now a full-on marching band. What is that? You sit up again, feeling the chills seep into your very bones. It's as if the cold air saw you tugging at your mottled blanket, thought, oh, she's up for a comedy act, and decided winter would have an encore. And so the cycle goes. You drift in and out of fitful sleep, haunted by thoughts more tormenting than your neighbor's incessant fascination with prunes. You dream that you're running, but every step feels like wading through treacle, or perhaps mud. Each swirl of dreams a reminder that to be a peasant is to hunger for something more, something beyond the daily grind. In one particularly vivid moment, you dream you're at a feast, a table spilling over with roasted meats, breads, and for some reason, a very unhelpful talking turnip. What is going on, you think, only to be jolted awake by a very real, very alarmed pigeon trying to snuggle inside your straw pile. You shoot up, half scared and half annoyed, wondering if the universe is perhaps just trying to mess with your head now. Midnight is no longer just a point in time, but an endless cycle. All you can do is huddle deeper into your ill-fitting coat, a mix of wool and surviving costumes that chase with a true ferocity. As dawn creeps in, the sound of a rooster crowing echoes a welcome herald for some and an ominous alarm for others. After a night spent wrestling with shadows and the relentless chill of the dirt floor, is there any mystery left about why peasant life feels like a perpetual game of who can survive until lunch? As the light begins to filter through the cracks in your wattle and daub walls, illuminating the motes of dust dancing in the early morning sun, one thing becomes painfully clear. Whether you wake refreshed or dead tired, this waking life is just another chapter, and sleep is that dangling carrot just out of reach. So you might as well start digging into breakfast because, well, starving doesn't allow for napping. And as you stumble out amid the wakeful world with a heavy heart and head full of dreams, take a moment to chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Medieval life may have been a nightmare, but at least you can look forward to another day of absurdity where laughter is the best remedy and morning light is somehow, always, just a little more divine than last night's troubles. Now, as the sounds of morning noises beckon you up, remember, sleep may evade you, but it's always waiting for you to dive back in someday, hopefully with a little less straw and a few more trimmings. Sweet dreams, dear listener, may they be pleasantly absurd. Chapter 21, the first sign of hope awakening to a green sprout. Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight, we're plunging into a moment softer than your favorite sweater and more heartwarming than the smell of fresh baked bread. Yes, we're talking about the joy of seeing the first green sprout pushing through the thawed earth in late May. It's a sight that says spring is strutting in like a rooster who just learned it can crow. Before we embark on this verdant adventure, let's admire the absurdity of life in the 1200s. Ever woke up to that miraculous moment when your alarm blares and you think, I could really go for a hot shower? Now imagine waking up in the Middle Ages only to realize your hot shower is basically a bucket of cold water heated over a fire. Good luck finding a temperature that doesn't evoke cries of, my wall is on fire. But hold on, dear awake traveler. If you shuffled into a medieval peasant's hut and thought, have you washed your hair recently? You'd have been met with a blank stare reserved for questions like, is cake a bad breakfast? Now, without too much delay, or the chance of being asked to scrub the hen's feet, let's get cozy, dim those lights, and consider this. If you were a peasant, absorbing the first hints of spring, how would you measure hope? Would it be a glimpse of a new growing season, or maybe the fleeting vision of bread without weevils? Congratulations, you've just woken up in the 1200s, where a cloth of dirt and laughter is only occasionally trampled by a sheep. As you stretch and shuffle out of that delightful pile of hay, masquerading as a bed, you notice a change in the air. The lingering scent of mud thaw and the faint aroma of something green. Ah, yes. The world is waking up like a bear, slowly shaking off its winter hibernation, reminding you that hope is not just an abstract concept, buried beneath a pile of frost and farm chores. No, Hope looks like that brave little sprout, daring to poke its head through the Mother Earth's crust, channeling its inner gladiator against all odds. It's late May, and the sun has finally decided to stray from its gloomy winter haunts. Instead of huddling against the frost on your dirt floor, you're greeted by the warm rays filtering through slits in your makeshift home, illuminating the motes of dust that dance like joyful peasants at a rare festival. You step outside and breathe in deeply, only to be confronted by the unending scent of dung. Yet, beneath the earthy fragrance lies that unmistakable hint of optimism. It smells like hope and possibly freshly composted intentions. As you survey the landscape, it's like the earth has seen better days, muddy patches everywhere. Patches of churned soil resembling a bag of mixed nuts. Between the groans of your bones, reminiscent of a well-used wooden cart, you can almost hear the plants cheer, "We're alive," and simultaneously wonder how many unfortunate weeds thought they could ruin the party. Peasants, say what you will about their modest lives, had a knack for seeing beauty in the most mundane things. An aspiring writer wouldn't dream of such eloquence, but a medieval peasant could spot a sprout in the dirt and wax poetic about the day it would produce the finest turnips. Ah, yes, they'd say. A fine day indeed when carrots no longer play hide and seek with the bunnies. But hold your turnips a minute. This isn't just about sprouting vegetables. It's a metaphor as rich as the soil beneath your feet. That little green bud is a beacon of joy, a testament to resilience, much like the guy who tried to make pants out of bog grass last summer. Spoiler alert, he forgot to check for insects first, and ended up being more snack than snappy dresser. You glance down at the earth, half expecting it to speak back to you. After all, you've now seen how welcoming it is to fresh greens, but terrible at hosting those pesky winter pests. It's a strange dichotomy. Life pushing its way through the hardships, while the memory of winter's chill is still echoing like some ghostly bard, lamenting a long-forgotten love. Suddenly, the distant rattle of your neighbor's cart breaks your daydream. Farmers have things to do, and if there's one thing you don't want to be, it's unproductive in a world that measures your worth in bushels of grain. You're reminded that while hope blooms in the form of tiny sprouts, life also means, hey, you've got vegetables to plant. While you may dream about basking in the sunlight as daisies sway, reality insists you need to work like a medieval machine fueled by sheer willpower and the occasional blessing from the local saint. The folks of the village pause to marvel at the tiny invaders, all while muttering sweet nothings about how every little sprout counts. As you join in their joyful crowing over the first signs of growth, you can't help but laugh. Only 3 more months, you say to the nearest friend, till we'll all fight over whose cabbage is bigger. And now, dear listener, as the sun climbs higher, paving the way for those bounteous harvests, and maybe a dance-off over who took home the prize turnip, remember this lesson. In a world where survival is an extreme sport and comfort is a distant fairy tale, there is always room for growth, even if it often means battling the local wildlife for the first bite. So let's take a moment to appreciate that in every sprout, there is humor, hope, and an undeniable sense of community echoing through muddy streets. And remember, just when you think everything's gone stale, a tiny miracle might just push its way into your heart. After all, hope, much like an uninvited goat, can always find a way to make itself at home. Chapter 22. The grime and wine of peasant life, digging deep into the dirt. Hey guys, welcome back. Tonight, we're plunging into something grimmer than an angry cat in a bathtub. The astonishing resilience of a medieval peasant, enduring day after relentless day in the 1200s. Imagine waking up every morning to the sound of a rooster crowing, only to realize that rooster is probably also your breakfast. Yes, life was that unforgiving. But don't fret, we're diving deep into the hilariously hopeless reality of peasant life, where hardship is just another Tuesday and the only thing thicker than the mud is the farmer's accent. If you're comfy, do us a favor, like, subscribe, and maybe leave a comment about how much you'd hate to trade places with these folks only if you actually enjoy this. And as you settle in, dim the lights, toss a pillow behind your neck, and pace yourself for a wild ride through dirt-clad lives, where the concept of a spa day is a hot soak in a bucket and maybe some potpourri made of half-rotted veggies. As you sink into this historical time capsule, have you ever pondered what it might be like to flower pick in a muddy garden only to have a pig run off with the last of your carrots? Or what if your greatest nemesis was the very squash you planted, creeping around like some stealthy vegetable ninja? What if your version of a night out involves squatting next to a stinking river trying to spot fish, except half the time you caught a bad cold instead? Congratulations. You've just woken up in the 1200s, where the sun rises over fields more uneven than your cousin Phil's attempts at juggling. You're stepping into peasant shoes, literally squelching through mud that might just eat your sandals for breakfast. Welcome to your life as a medieval cultivator, where existence is less about dreaming and more about surviving a constant battle against the earth, complete with motivational speeches from your neighbor's crow. Let's talk about endurance, shall we? Your day begins with the first ray of sunlight, or as you prefer to call it, the moment your stomach starts sounding like a ravenous bear. Nothing gets peasants moving faster than hunger, a reminder that the breadbasket has more holes than your favorite pair of socks. You go from comfy dreams of pastries to a back-breaking reality of dragging your body out of that haybed, a luxury you share with the occasional flea that whispers sweet nothings in your ear during the night. Yes, one more thing you did not sign up for the moment you decided living off the land sounded romantic. As you step outside, you're greeted by a chorus of birds, the occasional goat bleating its disapproval, and the unmistakable scent of livestock. Don't worry, they're just giving you a pep talk on what culinary delight will keep you fueled. You see this muck. They instruct you with all the wisdom of a medieval sage. It's both your bane and your business. Partner, plant, plow, and pray for the best. With your trusty spade in hand, you stride confidently, or more accurately, you shuffle gingerly into the quagmire that is your field. It's like trying to walk across a marsh where the marsh has declared a personal vendetta against you. Every step sinks you deeper into the gooey embrace of despair, the mud happily reminding you that it has no intention of loosening its grip anytime soon. If only shoes could talk, they'd scream, "Help us escape this gruesome fate." And there you are, digging day in and day out, fueled by the idea that one good harvest will somehow transform your life, yet knowing in the back of your mind it might just come with more weeds than crops. Perhaps this is what your old college roommate meant by facing your demons, except your demons are nameless and have a life expectancy that rivals your own. Ever wondered how farmers turned hardship into humor? Picture this. You're surrounded by fellow peasants sweating more than an overcooked turnip in the midday sun. One slips and groans, "I'm planting more potatoes for that perfect mashed option," and everyone instantly gets lost in a debate over the merits of lumpy versus creamy. I mean, what else is there to chat about when the harvest is 3 weeks late and possibly plotting its revenge? And let's not forget the animals. Certainly, they seem more interested in your livelihood than any heartfelt connection. Every time you stoop to yank a stubborn weed, one of your pigs saunters over, eyeing the fresh greens with a kind of joy reserved for reality TV villains. "Oh, what's this?" it seems to ask. "A gourmet menu just for me?" Don't mind if I do. Call it luck or just sheer audacity. The misuse of your crops has become the local pig's gourmet buffet. As you persevere, exhaustion weighs down your shoulders like an overstuffed sack of flour. You mutter under your breath about the unfairness of life. "I'm not just growing potatoes," you grumble. "I'm raising a grueling narrative worthy of a tragic ballad." And yes, if only the local bard could hear your plight over the sound of what you suspect might be an animal rolling in something offensive. But as the sun dips below the horizon and you return home, dust and grime becoming your second layer of skin, take comfort in knowing that every toil has its punchline. With the distant sounds of your neighbor's laughter echoing in the twilight, you appreciate the absurdity of your existence. Not just surviving, but thriving in a chorus of grim endurance, sharing witty anecdotes about the day's back-breaking antics. And amid the weight of it all, you discover lightness tucked under the chaos, an impression that, perhaps, enduring the nearly unbearable conditions of peasant life produced an unexpected camaraderie. So as you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that resilience, much like those stubborn weeds, always finds a way to sprout, sometimes in the most comical of circumstances. If you can laugh at the dirt while you dig, you might just emerge as the richest farmer in your own right, or at the very least, the most entertaining. Chapter 23. The Lost Art of Childhood Amidst the Muck. Alright, dear listeners, let's momentarily shift to a tone slightly grimmer than the aftermath of a medieval feast, where the roast turns out to be a rat. Picture this. A rusted knife half buried in mud in a little child's doll, its smile eerily faded yet hauntingly hopeful, both remnants from a simpler time, uncovered by the melting snow. Here's where the heartstrings tighten like a poorly spun yarn as the life of our peasant comes into focus, a life woven tighter than the threads of their tattered garments. As you take in this scene, you feel the chill of winter's past, plummeting through the air with the grace of a constipated pigeon. The peasant steps gingerly through the muck, squelching through the once frozen earth, their breath visible against the cool air. Each exhale a ghostly reminder of the warmth they yearn for, much like their lost loves. That dole and knife whisper stories of laughter turned to silence, and every scratch of the blade against the mud feels like a reminder of names that once danced upon innocent lips, now echoes of the past. Ever found yourself reminiscing in a way that feels like falling down the rabbit hole? Imagine this peasant, face to face with memories more vivid than lunch at a five-star restaurant, since five-star dining is an abstraction in this era. Instead, they recall the names of every little one they've lost, each sharper than a rusted knife, a blade meant for harvesting grain, now turned to bittersweet reflections. If only they'd made it through the winter, they murmur quietly to themselves. Surely we could have crafted a frost-resistant snow fort that could withstand even the most menacing chicken. But alas, that's a whimsical thought for a cold, muddy evening. Instead, echoing through their mind is the name of every friend, every sibling, and Thaddeus, whom they swore was just lost behind the barn when the fever came. Just like that, dreams of an expedition in the woods, building imaginary kingdoms beneath the looming branches of ancient oaks, fade to the background, overshadowed by the weight of reality, one not unlike waking up at 3 a.m., staring into the void, accompanied only by a nagging desire to finish the last cookie. Let's talk about those names for a moment. Picture them spinning in the air like leaves caught in a relentless autumn wind, swirling and flickering just out of reach. In a world where losing a child to illness was tragically regular, more common than getting stuck with a tall person standing in front of you at a concert, peasants carried those memories like heavy sacks of flour, breaking their backs beneath the burden, while still managing to maintain a glimmer of grit. Name them all, the peasant murmurs softly, fingers brushing against the remnants of that dingy doll. It's not just a child's plush companion. It's a vessel of dreams that could have been lost catching in the sunlight as miraculously as that last sip of lukewarm mead on a Friday night. There was little Eleanor, so bright, always chasing after butterflies, not a care in the world unless you counted the pig that ran through our cabbage patch. The absurdity of that thought tickles their lips into a hinted smile. Imagine the chaos. You can almost see little Eleanor giggling and waving her hands like some heroic knight defending the household against all four-legged invaders while brandishing her little wooden sword. But alas, when your sword of hope is made out of twigs, even the fiercest battles are bound to be lost, much like that cabbage. With every knotted memory, the knife and doll serve as poignant reminders of innocence washed ashore by the tides of time. What's that saying? While the world churns around you like a dirty river, don't forget to fashion a boat of resiliency. Both funny and tragic, our peasant realized that in life's game of survival, laughter often took refuge alongside tears. Finding humor in the bleakness became necessary, much like a daily dose of miraculous bread that came from a prayer, a dream, and maybe a little goat's milk. And as you reflect on the sheer absurdity of life amidst loss, you might wonder how often you've laughed in the face of tribulation. Have you ever spilled your morning coffee only to find solace in a croissant sharing your day's woes? Irony spins a cozy cocoon around us all like a worn blanket with mysterious stains, each mark a testament to a humorous mishap long ago. Our peasant can take comfort in the fact that maybe, just maybe, Eleanor is up above, riding on clouds made of cotton candy, fighting alongside her fellow spirits in a never-ending quest against rogue chickens. So, the knife, the doll, it's here in the mud, where memories intertwined with aspirations are forever tangled, interspersed with laughter and loss like an awkward reunion of relatives at a family picnic. They chuckle softly amidst their own tears, transforming their heartache into gentle, whimsical tales that could one day span an entire generation. Who wouldn't want to serenade their descendants with the story of how a pig thwarted an entire childhood dream of cabbage castle construction? And with that thought, drift gently into the embrace of your own dreams. For if you listen closely, you might hear the laughter of a child echoing through the ages, urging you to wield your very own wooden sword against life's troubles, while sharing a good chuckle over the kitchen table, making the mud a little more bearable. Chapter 24, The Chicken Chase and a Whiff of Hope. Hey guys, welcome back to the wild ride of medieval mischief. Tonight, we're diving into something fresher than a royal's breath after indulging in a banquet. A delightful chase through filth and feathers as a child attempts to catch the neighborhood chicken. Buckle up because this escapade has all the fragrance of wet earth, budding grass, and a pint of chicken hysteria, because nothing says medieval joy like a mouthful of feathers and an adrenaline-pumping pursuit. If that thought doesn't bring warmth to your heart, perhaps you've just been royally snubbed by a goat. But before we wander into our tales from the grime, maybe a little housekeeping? If you're enjoying this journey through time, like finding an unexpected piece of cheese at the bottom of your fridge, consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment below after this whimsical jaunt. But here's the kicker, only if you actually enjoy it. No pressure, unless we're talking about last week's stale bread. Now, let's set the scene. I invite you to dim those lights, turn on the oscillating fan you thought was just for aesthetics, and get cozy. Picture this. You've just rolled out of bed in 1200s England, and your morning ritual doesn't involve overpriced lattes, but rather the sweet sounds of a medieval morning. The cheerful clucking of chickens, alongside heartwarming cries of, "Hey, you little feathered thief, come back." Speaking of awakening in the past, has there ever been a more absurd scenario than waking up to a world where your biggest concern is not missing that important meeting, but rather not getting trampled by the village pig on the way to Resund? Fetch water? Ever found yourself in a tickle fight with a chicken? I assure you, it's nothing compared to what our medieval child is encountering just outside. Congratulations! You've just woken up in the 1200s, the year when both bath days and social hygiene are mere fables told by the fire, certainly not practiced. With that, let's leap into the vivid world of mud, mischief, and merriment. The backyard before you is a canvas splattered with the colors of chaos. Wet earth and budding grass are present, far better than the stench of mildew wafting from that sad old hut down the lane. You can already smell it, that earthy aroma, reminiscent of little sprouts daring to peek through the soil. A stark contrast to the lingering after effects of yesterday's cabbage stew that linger upon a careless wind. Out of the corner of your eye, you catch sight of a child, no older than 6, barreling through the yard like a one-person stampede, a miniature knight in pursuit of a fluffy foe, the chicken. That silly bird, resplendent in an impressive show of feathers, clucks defiantly while fanning its wings, fluttering just out of reach like your motivation for Monday mornings. The child trips, mud flying everywhere, and as they tumble, you can practically hear the squishy, satisfying sound of muddy socks meeting earth, the soundtrack of true childhood. Ever tried to catch a chicken? Let me assure you, it's like attempting to catch a cloud during a storm, or grappling with your Wi-Fi connection when it's crucial for your next Netflix binge. You imagine this child, maybe named Cedric or Beatrice, who knows, jumps up, brushing mud from their little tunic and swinging their arms like a windmill in a vigorous gale. The determination is absolutely surreal, yet relatable. Haven't you seen that same fire in the eyes of a child shoving aside their broccoli at dinner? The sounds of laughter swirl around you, mingling with the persistent cackles of the chicken. It's a delightful cacophony of joy, slightly reminiscent of those family gatherings where you pray the ambience will drown out Uncle Reginald's tales of his glory days, those days with his simplistic approach to life, scheming up conspiracies involving mud pies and neighborhood squirrels. Oh, the trials of chasing chickens. Each stride through the muddy yard is a brave exploration of the battlefield, dodging puddles like they're moats surrounding a grand castle. Which begs the question, are chickens more formidable adversaries, or simply feathered jesters mocking your primal instincts? As Cedric, or whatever we've whimsically named this bold little character, gains ground, grabbing at feathers midair, it's here that you realize life's valuable lesson. Pursuit is what matters. It's not just about the catch, but the adventure through the muck and mire. You can't help but chuckle, imagining the future tale this child will weave for their companions. Once upon a time, I faced down the great chicken, Lord of Lancre, proving myself through plucky bravery and an unwavering zest for mud. With every spin and twirl, the scent of the grass rises, mingling beautifully with the lingering funk of earth after rain. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The playful chase that obscures the more serious woes of life as a medieval peasant, where every day feels like a hand-me-down fortune, and somehow we find joy amidst the absurdity. If you pause to observe, you'll see not just a child or a chicken, but a symphony of resilience. It's proof life has a unique way of nudging us toward laughter even when chickens are involved. Life at the edge of a muddy yard may have its challenges, but it's also laced with moments worth chasing after, much like that slippery little chicken. So let this whimsical chase ease your mind and settle deep into your dreams where muddy feet and laughter orchestrate the dance of life. and perhaps you'll join Cedric in this glorious adventure of feather chasing in your slumber. It's all chicken and giggles until, of course, the roosters begin their morning concert to herald the return of another day in the gritty charm of medieval life. And there we conclude this joyful romp, amid feathers and muck. What's next is but a collection of peaceful dreams, where the mud is just a memory, and you might find yourself in pursuit of a far more significant chase, the chase of serenity and slumber. Chapter 25, The Countess of Cabbage and the Gloomy Winter Reserves. Hey guys, welcome back to the cozy corner of our whimsical foray into medieval mischief. Tonight, we're diving into the culinary wonders of the High Middle Ages, where winter isn't just coming, it's practically snowboarding down your chimney. Imagine us as time-traveling couch potatoes, contemplating the precarious state of root vegetables and the existential dread of an elderly peasant facing the long, frigid season ahead. Spoiler alert, it's colder than the reception you get when you accidentally text your boss a meme. Now, before we meander through the icy fields of history, could you do us a solid? If you're enjoying this wild ride through time, much like discovering a stash of leftover pizza at the back of your fridge, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below, but only if you're truly amused. No pressure. We wouldn't want to add to the weighty burden of your self-imposed medieval diet. Alright, picture this. Dim those lights, flip on the fan that has become a decorative piece in your living room, and get snug under your blanket, which is definitely not made of camel hair or sprinkled with dry leaves. It's time to prepare yourself for a sentimental stroll through the life of a medieval peasant, where the survival of winter rides on food reserves that would make today's pantry look like a Michelin-starred restaurant. Let's set the scene here. You're waking up in the 1200s, a splendid age when personal hygiene was left to the mercy of your last bath. Potatoes might as well have been the most glamorous item on the social calendar. A peasant's life is about to unfold like a drippy cabbage leaf just waiting to be boiled, a plant that deserves its own dramatic backstory. Ever thought about your relationship with greens and how those relationships with vegetables parallel your month-old gym membership? Wasn't that meant to be the year of healthy living? Of course, it always leads back to the fridge, where all a cabbage awaits frozen in time, just like your aspirations. Congratulations, dear listener. You've just stepped into a world where the question arises, how many precisely wilted leaves does it take to scrape through a harsh winter? And what would you do if your dinner wore a sadder expression than you do on a Monday morning? Did you know that in the 1200s, it wasn't just thriftiness that fueled the peasant's diet? It was sheer survival. Winter meant fragile rations rattling in an unyielding drum. And you're reminded this, my friends, is the glamorous life of a medieval peapod. Now, allow yourself to slide into the worn but animated shoes of our elderly peasant. Let's call him Olaf. You peer into his somber hut, where warmth is merely a general idea floating in the air like an elusive dream. Olaf's face carries a weathered wisdom, crinkled like a well-loved parchment, as he counts his piddling stores of food, meticulously, like an accountant preparing for tax season. And trust me, his ledger of cabbage might just fill an entire folio with hesitant hope. Picture poor Olaf standing by the hearth that stubbornly refuses to stay lit, trying to summon warmth not from glimmering embers but merely from dreams of summer vegetables. There he is, counting his cabbages twice, just praying the next winter doesn't hurl more misfortune upon him because, let's face it, Olaf's past experience has taught him about the bleakness of empty stomachs better than any self-help book. His fingers trail over a few sad cabbages as if conducting a symphony of helplessness. Every touch sends mini chills up his spine, reminding him that while these vegetables are robust enough to endure frost, they're no match for the unyielding rhythm of hunger that lurks in the shadows. Have you ever stared pitifully at the last jar of peanut butter, wondering if it's worth some emergency bread, or should you just reenact your own version of a daring French cuisine where toast somehow disappears? Welcome to the trials of dinner planning, medieval style. In this melodrama of survival, Olaf contemplates the notion of what if, amid the dim light. What if that one cabbage could somehow transform into a delightful feast? Or even better, what if a raven descended from the sky with a roast chicken? Spoiler, it won't. That delightful flight of fancy is as far-fetched as a cat giving unsolicited relationship advice. No magic will save him from writing recipes with the most optimistic twists. You hear constant clanks and screeches, a cacophony of laborious life. A village bride complaining about the mixed quality of cabbages certainly wouldn't be an exaggeration. Maybe it would be about Olaf's eternally optimistic patch of ground, which grows more soggy than a sad pancake left on the stove too long. It's a comedy of errors, and yet isn't that the essence of life? At some point, doesn't cabbage hold the secret of the universe, or at least a potential stew? With each passing day, you can almost see Olaf's shoulders sag lower under the weight of his cabbage packing decisions. But here's the twist. He's resilient. Armed with a slant-eyed grin, he proclaims, "If we can survive another winter, next spring will surely send cabbages as abundant as the stars." Yes, optimism flows above these fields, like warm porridge flavored with a hint of snarky irony. So, as you drift off into the realm of night, let the thoughts of Olaf remind you that even the simplest lives hold stories worth tending. Whether it's a sad cabbage or the memory of last month's takeout diet, we are all on our quest to find that warmth, laughter, and perhaps an absurd sense of hope, hopefully, minus frostbite. And thus, we close this chapter on the bitter yet rich world of our elder peasant. Reflect on the culinary swan song of cabbage, overflowing with surreal twists before we continue on this intriguing journey of medieval dreams. Rest easy, dear listener, for tomorrow we shall unravel even more amusing tales from a time as wild as the frosty cucumbers in your grandmother's pickle jar. And now, as the candle burns low, as the smoky cottage fades back into the shadows of memory, and as the echoes of a long, hard medieval day soften into quiet stillness, let your breath slow, and let your heart settle gently into calm. Tonight, we walked beside people whose lives were shaped by struggle long before sunrise. Mothers who prayed their children would live long enough to laugh. Fathers who worked fields that did not always give back. Families who endured hunger, loss, cold, and uncertainty, yet still found reasons to smile, to hope, to carry on. We saw the newborn child swaddled in coarse linen, a baby welcomed not with luxury, but with determination. A tiny life born into a bargain the world demanded of every peasant family. A life that might bring help, or connection, or survival, in a world where even love had to negotiate with hardship. We watched the villagers who woke in the dark, who ate what they had, who loved fiercely despite the fragility of their world. We felt their quiet jokes whispered by the hearth, their tenderness amid labor, their ability to find warmth in places that barely held heat. And in all that hardship, there was still something deeply human, the resilience that kept them alive, the humor that softened the pain, the love that made even the poorest cottage feel like a world worth staying in. So now, as you lie in a warm bed wrapped in blankets soft as clouds, breathing clean air, surrounded by peace those villagers rarely knew, take a moment to be grateful. Grateful for comfort, grateful for safety, grateful for the gentle quiet of your world. Let the medieval smoke fade. Let the weight lift from your shoulders. Let your thoughts drift like embers settling in a hearth. You're safe. You've done enough. And everything else can wait until morning. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and slip softly into sleep. Good night.